Chapter 543. None of the people here were mediocre. The strength of such a terrifying lineup had obviously reached an extreme level. In fact, it was hard to tell how many times stronger they were compared to the current strength of the Jun family. To put it bluntly, if Mei Shui-yin was not included, why would there be a need for the 90 top experts to attack together? Perhaps 10 of them would have been enough to destroy the entire Jun family. So, how would the Jun family cope with this crisis? It seemed that there was no hope for the Jun family to survive under the current circumstances. They could only drag a few people down with them at most. Moreover, they might not be able to drag the key figures of the other party down with them. The disparity in strength between the two sides was too great. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were as different as the sky and the earth. Mei Shui-yin sighed at the thoughtfulness of the three Holy Lands' preparations for the war for seizing the heavens. But it was a different matter when it came to her. She sneered in the sky. Then her body suddenly soared into the sky, and her body flashed. No one noticed how she had moved, but she had already arrived on the ground. Then she faced half-bodied and said, "Half-bodied, I've already come down. What can you do to me now?" Mei Shui-yin's beautiful face was as cold as ice. She seemed calm and composed. However, she was actually very anxious inside. The reason why she had spoken up in the sky and had come down at this time was because she wanted to buy some time. Perhaps a few people from a Jun family would be able to escape if they were lucky, and they wouldn't have to worry about the opportunity to make a comeback as long as the seeds of the Jun family remained. However, the most important thing in Mei Shui-yin's heart was as long as he could escape. Then Mei Shui-yin would have no regrets even if she were to die in battle today. I hope that the Snake King, the Tiger King, and Jun Moxie will understand my intentions. They won't waste my sacrifice. I'll never see those enemies again. Time was too tight at the moment, so there was no time to make any arrangements. Therefore, Mei Shui-yin could only place her hopes on the heavens. I'm sure you know why we're here. Half-bodied smiled in a gloomy manner. His voice was extremely soft as he continued. The young lady's cultivation is remarkable. So, you certainly know about the war for seizing the heavens. And the Jun family's miraculous pills will determine the outcome of the war for seizing the heavens. For the sake of the safety of the continent and the well-being of the common people, as long as you and the Jun family hand over the divine pill and the alchemist, we swear that we will never offend the Jun family. We will retreat immediately. What do you think? This matter can be decided by the young lady. I'm giving the Jun family and the young lady enough face. Is it related to the safety of the continent and the well-being of the common people? What a big hat. Unfortunately, this cannot be a reason for your shameless and despicable behavior. Mei Shui-yin said disdainfully, "You can't hide it from them. Others might not know what the three Holy Lands are like, but do you think I don't? If you want the elixir, just say it. Why you have to use such a big hat to pin it on me? What does your own greed have to do with the common people of the world?" The young lady is a straightforward person. I appreciate it very much. A middle-aged man from the illusory ocean of blood sighed, smiled elegantly. He then leisurely stepped forward and said, listening to the young lady's words, "It seems that you know a lot about our three Holy Lands. I'm ashamed to say that we've come here for our own interests. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that we've come here for our own interests. But the young lady should know that we've come here for our own interests. However, the common people of the world will benefit in the end. I believe this, and no one can deny it. The young lady is familiar with the history of the continent. So, it's only natural that you understand this. Those who wish to achieve great things shouldn't bother with trifles. Even the emperor of a country is like this. So, how can we protect the common people of the continent?" This man's words were reasonable and well-grounded. His tone was neither servile nor overbearing. In fact, it was clear and logical. Even Mei Shui-yin found it difficult to refute him. She then carefully observed the man's appearance. She noticed that he had delicate features. His stature was moderate. He stood tall and straight. He was dressed in a purple robe. It was very eye-catching in the snowy night. There were 5 golden threads on the sleeves and collar of his purple robe. However, She heard him smile elegantly and continue. Moreover, my illusory ocean of blood has come to the June family for another very important matter. The June family had destroyed two of our great master-level experts. Moreover, their great master-level expert, Huang Taiyang, had also been ambushed here. These three men were qualified to contribute to the war for seizing the heavens a few years later. So, this matter alone couldn't be said to be trivial. So, the young lady and the June family must give us an explanation no matter who's in the right or wrong in this matter. Otherwise, it won't be good for anyone if our friendship is damaged. His tone was very gentle. However, the meaning behind his words wasn't gentle at all. In fact, anyone could hear the threat in his words. Mei Shuiyin quietly looked at the gentle and refined face in front of her. She naturally knew that the other party looked like he was only in his 30s or 40s, but his actual age was more than 7 or 8 times that of 30 or 40 years old. Xi Jinghong, I've said it before. Despicable and shameless people don't need a reason. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Shamelessness is shamelessness. Mei Shuiyin's tone was as cold as ice. As for Huang Taiyang's death, don't you know the reason? And you still have the nerve to talk about it. It's truly despicable, but you've still chosen to talk about it. This makes me despise your illusory ocean of blood. This man's name was Xi Jinghong. He had another resounding name. Purple Qi from the east. The purple Qi covers the sky and the cloud hand. His sword comes from the east. He was the third most powerful person in the illusory ocean of blood. His swordsmanship wasn't inferior to Ning Wuqing's. His palm technique had the power to split mountains and split rocks. Even Mei Shuiyin hadn't expected that he would come in person. It seemed that the illusory ocean of blood was taking this matter very seriously. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were determined to win. Whether I despise you or not doesn't matter at this moment. Do you think that you can leave tonight? The man who had spoken was the leader of the Supreme Golden City. He was dressed in a linen robe. He wore a supreme crown on his head. There were 3 pearls inlaid on it. It looked as if the emperor of a country had suddenly appeared. Xiao Weicheng, do you think that you're qualified to say such words? Mei Shuiyin smiled coldly. Do the 3 pearls of the Supreme Golden City only know how to boast shamelessly? Xiao Weicheng laughed. Then, he waved his hand and shouted, "Everyone attack! Let's capture this lowly woman first." Ma Jiangming laughed strangely and flashed out. His face was filled with endless killing intent, and he was the first to rush out. His eyes were filled with jealousy and hatred. Ma Jiangming didn't know why, but he didn't like beautiful women. His face was filled with vicissitudes of life, but his heart was not old. His smile had a dagger and showed no mercy. Mei Shuiyin let out a soft whistle and was about to attack. Suddenly, a petite and graceful figure flashed by. A green figure was especially dazzling in the pure white snow that covered the sky. A few light explosions sounded. A grayish-white figure and a green figure were already entangled in battle. The two of them spun around a few times, and it was no longer clear who was who. There were only 2 streaks of light rolling up and down in the snow. The flying snow in the air seemed to be scattered by the 2 of them, Snake King and Qian Sun. Mei Shuiyin was very anxious. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen hadn't retreated in time. Then, are the others still here? Then he saw 2 tall and sturdy silhouettes dashing over from the left while he was thinking this. They were cursing loudly as they walked. Their voices were rough, and their curses were extremely loud and unpleasant to hear. They were Big Bear and Earthcracker. 2 figures were also rushing over from the right. Their movements were extremely agile. They didn't say a word. Their long hair was fluttering in the wind and snow. They were the solitary eagle of the prairie and Feng Wanyun of the fierce Gale swordsman. 2 people were approaching from distance behind Mei Shuiyin. Their footsteps were heavy. Their faces were solemn. They were Junjian Tian and Jun Wui. Both father and son had a determined look on their faces. Their faces were solemn, but extremely calm. Mei Shuiyin was so anxious that she broke out in a cold sweat. Oh my God, why haven't any of these people retreated? Aren't they just throwing away their lives in the face of such an overwhelming enemy? What's the point of coming out knowing that they're going to die? Right now was not the time to be a hero. As long as they were alive, there would be a day for them to make a comeback. Mei Shuiyin didn't understand the intentions of the father and son. Tonight, the enemies who had come to the Jun family were all stronger than the Jun family. The Jun family was on the brink of life and death, but both of them had the same unyielding spirit in their hearts. How could they let their guests stand in front of them at such a time? Even if they had to die in front of them. Because this was the Jun family. As long as Mo Xie could escape, the Jun family would rise again sooner or later. Today's blood feud would be repaid one day. Solitary Eagle's mind was on the Jun family. Ever since he arrived at the Jun family, he hadn't contributed much. Instead, he had received great kindness from them. Solitary Eagle was a person who could clearly distinguish between kindness and hatred. He felt that he had let down the Jun family. How could he not repay such a great kindness? Now that the enemy was attacking, Solitary Eagle didn't hesitate and rushed out. As for Feng Wanyun, he was feeling extremely complicated. He had already escaped once in Tiannan. Was he going to escape a second time? Then what kind of person would he be? A tortoise hiding in its shell? Even if he knew that the enemy's strength was not weaker than his, and many of them were even stronger than him, he would only be courting death if he went up. But as a hot-blooded man, if he didn't do it now, then when? Forget it, if I die, then I die. So Feng Wanyun followed Solitary Eagle and rushed out. Roar! Jun Mo Xie's 300 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer members all appeared at the edge of the courtyard. Their faces were cold and solemn, and each of them had an expression of grief and indignation. They held Xian beast crossbows in their left hand and sharp swords in their right. Their bodies were filled with killing intent, and their faces were filled with violence as they slowly surrounded them. Chapter 544. Third night. Also, a long and loud shout was heard from the top of the courtyard's wall as 3 silhouettes appeared. Hai Chun Feng, Song Shang, and Bailey Luo Yun appeared at the same time. The long silver swords in their hands reflected the snow-white light. Hai Chun Feng laughed heartily. Old Song, I never thought that the two of us would have the strength to fight so many great masters. This is truly a joyous matter worthy of celebration. Song Shang sneered as he grabbed the wine gourd from his back and took a big gulp. His heroic spirit soared as he roared. Delightful! It wasn't clear whether he was happy drinking or agreeing with Hai Chun Feng's words. Old Song, if there's a next life, I, Hai Chun Feng, will invite you to drink wine for the rest of your life. Hai Chun Feng laughed heartily as his heroic spirit soared to the sky. Song Shang suddenly smiled and said in a loud voice, It's a deal. It's a deal. Hai Chun Feng promised in a deep voice. Let's clap hands to make an oath. Clap. The two men clapped their hands together as they made an oath of brotherhood in their next lives. Both of them were experienced men who had experienced hundreds of battles. So, how could they not know that they had reached the end of the road tonight? How could there be any hope of survival in the face of such a powerful opponent? However, the two men were still laughing and cursing each other. Their expressions were still heroic and free. Good man, I want to drink your wine in your next life. If you don't think that I'm not qualified enough, then leave me a share. Bailey Luo Yun's face was as cold as ice as he flashed to the two men's side. His eyes were burning with passion. Hai Chun Feng and Song Shang looked at each other in amazement. Then, they suddenly laughed and said, Who said that you're not qualified? Good brother, we're brothers in this life and in the next. Clap, clap, clap. The three men looked at each other and smiled. Hai Chun Feng and Song Shang weren't familiar with Bailey Luo Yun. In fact, they had only met once and a half. But they were undoubtedly good brothers since they were willing to sacrifice themselves at this critical juncture. Life and death is the best whetstone for friendship. Whether it was a hero or a martyr, loyal or treacherous, virtuous or foolish, whether it was a hypocrite or a genuine one, in the face of life and death, nothing could hide. Shi Chang Xiao and Lei Wu Bei, the two guests who had come to congratulate them yesterday, also appeared in succession. However, they appeared in the enemy's camp. However, in the camp of the three holy lands, where experts were as numerous as trees in a forest, the fourth and sixth great masters of the eight great masters were actually so unremarkable. Ding! The Serpent King and Ma Jiangming had both drawn their weapons at the same time. That clanging sound, just now, was clearly the sound of weapons clashing against each other. The two of them could be said to be the ancestors of sinister people. Both of them were scheming against each other in their hearts, and each of them chose the most unexpected moment to attack. Who would have thought that they would coincidentally bump into each other? In this exchange, Ma Jiangming's figure hurriedly retreated. This was because he discovered that in that instant of contact between his sword and the opponent's sword, a rice grain-sized hole had actually appeared. His sword was the 100-tempered cold iron sword. He had spent a great deal of blood, sweat, and tears on it. He didn't know how many people he had killed to obtain it. He had used this sword to roam the world unhindered for his entire life, and it had never been damaged. However, he hadn't expected that it would be damaged today. Ma Jiangming was greatly alarmed when he saw that his treasured sword had been damaged. He felt as if his heart was being twisted, and his soul was about to leave his body. The Snake King had seized the upper hand. So, he followed up with another attack. He twisted his waist, and his body bent at a strange angle in the air. In fact, it seemed as if his body had been bent into 7 or 8 sections. Then, he chased after Ma Jiangming with the speed of the wind. It seemed as if a huge snake was flying in the air. It seemed as if it was going to devour the enemy in the middle of the snowstorm. Ma Jiangming's eyes flashed. His heart moved, and he blurted out, "So, it's the Snake King." This attack seemed to be the signature move of the Snake King of the Tian Fa Forest. 7 bends of the spirit snake. However, Ma Jiangming felt that something wasn't right. The Snake King had fought Lei Wu Bei of the 8 great masters a few days ago, and both sides had ended in a draw. So, he could judge from this that the Beast King's body was famous for its valiant physical strength. But the Beast King was only at the Great Master level. So, how could he have forced Ma Jiangming to retreat? Moreover, the speed of this girl in front of him was much faster than the legendary Snake King. Too much. Ma Jiangming couldn't catch his breath at this astonishing speed. How could the Snake King, who was at most at the Great Master level, possess such speed? The Snake King's pursuit had already caught up with Ma Jiangming by the time this thought flashed in his mind. The Snake King raised his sword high in the air, and a silver light sprinkled down like a waterfall. Ma Jiangming roared, and raised his sword to block and counterattack. However, this wasn't the time to cherish his sword. He was afraid that he would lose his life if he didn't stake everything in this fight. The sword was certainly precious, but it wasn't as precious as his life. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen sneered as she saw this. Her long sword collided with Ma Jiangming's sword with a schwa sound, but it didn't issue the deafening sound that Ma Jiangming had expected. That was because the Snake King's sword had softened at this moment. It seemed as if it had turned into a real snake, and had coiled itself around Ma Jiangming's sword. Then, the sword's body had taken advantage of this opportunity to twist around Ma Jiangming's sword. Then, the sword's blade had changed to an impossible angle. Ma Jiangming's other arm had been cut open with a schwa sound. It was so deep that the bone could be seen. Ma Jiangming shouted loudly. His aged face spasmed, and beads of sweat started to drip down. This time, he had truly lived up to his name. His body hurriedly retreated, and his waist bent backwards as if his life depended on it. Even with his reputation as a superior supreme, he had actually been forced to such a state by the Snake King in just a few moves. Although he had underestimated his opponent, it was clear that the Snake King's astonishing speed and the strangeness of his sword had greatly exceeded his expectations. A green light flashed in Qian Sun's eyes, and the corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile. Her sword suddenly turned soft and turned as hard as iron. Then it stabbed towards Ma Jiangming's chest. How could Qian Sun not understand the bleak situation they were in right now? If they could take down one of the enemy's strongest experts, it would be greatly beneficial to their side. The back half of the Snake King's sword was still wrapped around Ma Jiangming's cold iron sword. But the front half of the sword had actually attacked on its own. The sword light flashed like lightning, and the forked tip of the sword was like a venomous snake's tongue. It was as fast as lightning. From the looks of it, Ma Jiangming could no longer dodge this attack. Two angry roars were heard. Suddenly, two supreme martial artists attacked from the left and right. One of them stabbed towards the Snake King's left shoulder with a flash of his sword, while the other struck towards the top of the Snake King's head with the force of a mountain. If Qian Sun maintained this sword attack, then Ma Jiangming would undoubtedly be heavily injured, and there was even a high chance that he would die. But she herself would also be in grave danger. If she wanted to dodge these two attacks, she would have to abandon her sword and retreat. The exquisite technique of wrapping around the opponent's weapon had actually become the greatest obstacle to her own advance and retreat. This attack was actually an exquisite technique to rescue the besieged by besieging Wei. With Ma Jiangming's status, fighting the Snake King alone was already a bit too much for him. It was an unfair victory, and it would be a joke if he didn't win. But now he had been defeated in just a few moves, and even had to be besieged by the other two. It could be said that he had lost all his face. Not only his own face, but even the three Holy Lands' faces had been swept to the ground. However, the people from the three Holy Lands didn't care about this at this moment, because everyone could see that the Snake King's sword was a peerless weapon. If they could obtain such a weapon, what did it matter if they were to carry a bit of a bad reputation? Moreover, the history books were always written by the victors. The Jun family's destruction was already a foregone conclusion. As long as they didn't say anything, who would know about this unpleasant episode? Qian Sun sneered and ridiculed. It turns out that the three Holy Lands are here to gang up on me. Today, my horizons have been broadened. Are these the three Holy Lands, or are they just street thugs? Her hand didn't stop moving even as she spoke. The tip of her long sword rapidly cut across Ma Jiangming's chest. Then, she calmly withdrew. The long sword was like a snake that had loosened its grip on the enemy. Then, it rapidly detached itself from the cold iron sword as she retreated. One person and one sword were like two agile snakes. They spun and flashed and had already retreated 100 feet away. However, their movements weren't hindered in the slightest. The speed and agility of the Snake King's agility had far exceeded everyone's expectations. It could be said that everyone was startled. In fact, the Snake King's sword would have been cut into two pieces if he hadn't been afraid of the two great master-level experts' fatal killing moves. So, he hadn't been able to use his sword moves properly. Ma Jiangming's body would have been cut into two pieces by now. Angry roars resounded from the sidelines. The two irascible Beast Kings, Bear Mountain and Earthcracker, had already started to exchange blows with the three great master-level experts. Zi Jinghong narrowed her eyes in a dangerous manner. Then, she slowly asked, "Are you the Snake King?" Qian Sun's Serpent Queen snorted and replied, "I'm the Snake King. What are you going to do about it?" "So, those two over there must be the Tiger King and the Bear King?" Zi Jinghong looked at the Snake King with a faint smile on her face. It seemed as if she had discovered a huge treasure. Qian Sun's Serpent Queen sneered. "Zi Jinghong, what are you trying to say? You're a real man. So, how can you be so wishy-washy like a woman? Even the heavens are helping me. This trip to the Jun family has turned out to be an unexpected harvest. I hadn't expected that I would be able to obtain those 3 Xiandans so easily. This has saved me a long and arduous journey." Zi Jinghong laughed wildly. Then, she waved her hand and shouted in a stern voice, "Kill. I only want the dead. I don't want the living." The illusory ocean of Blood's subordinates complied in unison. Then, they charged forward with a loud rumble. Their weapons gleamed brightly. It was obvious that they were about to attack. "Wait!" Mei Shuiyin shouted softly. Then, a sharp light flashed in her eyes. "Zi Jinghong, what did you just say? Did you say that you won the Beast King, Xiandan?" Her tone was low and slow, but it revealed the sharpest sense of danger. In fact, it even seemed a little gloomy. The pressure of an impending storm suddenly filled the entire area. The Beast King Xian Dan's most precious treasure. Who doesn't want it? Zi Jinghong smiled faintly. She placed her hands behind her back. Her demeanor was carefree and unrestrained. Then she said lightly, I, Zi Jinghong, am also a Xian cultivator. She even pretended to sigh as she said the last sentence. Zi Jinghong, you really have a lot of guts. Do you know who I am? Mei Xian said in a stern voice. How dare you act so presumptuously in front of me? Do you know how to write the word death? Chapter 545. The fourth chapter. Finally finished. Half-Bodied laughed in a strange manner. Then, he obscenely looked at Mei Xian's exquisite body with his one eye. Then he clicked his tongue and said, Today can be said to be one accident after another. The four Xian Beast Kings have left Tian Fa and appeared at the Jun family's residence. This is truly an unexpected harvest. It seems that even the heavens are on our side. So, an accident is an accident. This old man had never thought that the famous Venerable Mei of the Xian continent, the supreme leader of Tian Fa, would secretly become a woman and hide in a man's house. Mei Xian's complexion turned somewhat pale, half-bodied. Do you want to court death? Half-bodied smiled mischievously. Half-bodied's head can be taken as long as Venerable Mei has the strength to do so. However, it seems that it won't be easy today. Venerable Mei, this old man has something that he doesn't understand. So, he would like to consult you about it. He smiled evilly. What's the matter? Mei Xian's pretty face was filled with killing intent. Her eyes flickered with a blood-red light. Venerable Mei is very experienced and knowledgeable. Can't you find another man after so many years? I've heard that the Jun family's brat isn't even 20 years old. Or is it because the taste of the Jun family's brat is particularly enchanting? Could it be that Venerable Mei is unable to stop himself? Is that why he has come to Tianxiang City from thousands of miles away to offer himself as a bed partner? This old man is very curious about the current status of the famous Venerable Mei of the Xian continent. Which concubine of Jun Moxi is he? In any case, the position of Jun Moxi's wife is gone. So, it should be left for Jun Moxi's lewd sister-in-law. After all, there's still the Dugu family's Dugu Xiaoi. Is she the third or the fourth? Ha ha ha. Half-bodied looked at Mei Xian with a sinister look in his eyes. Then, he licked his lips and said with a mischievous smile, Venerable Mei, we're from the same generation. So, don't you feel ashamed that you're like an old cow robbing the cradle? Even if he's stripped naked like a young girl on the bed, but that young man is not as experienced as us. If the Venerable Mei is interested, or if he really can't satisfy me, although many parts of my body are damaged, that is the only part that is the most complete. Moreover, I haven't touched it for many years. I'm confident that I'm better than many strong men. At least, I'm much stronger than that naive young man. If the Venerable One doesn't mind, we can exchange a few pointers. It would be a wonderful thing. He hadn't even finished speaking when a loud roar resounded in the sky. Mei Xian had already arrived above his head. Half-Bodied's body spun around. Then, he shot out thousands of palm shadows with his one hand. He then tried his best to parry Mei Xian's attack. Then, he roared, the snake has come out of its hole. 30 silhouettes rushed over with a whoosh sound as he roared. They then formed a large circle. Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weiqing rushed out at the same time. They then launched a pincer attack on Mei Xian. Half-Bodied had fallen into a disadvantageous position under Mei Xian's attack. So, he let out a strange roar and counterattacked with all his strength. The remaining 27 Superior Supremes also attacked at the same time. They had only one target, Mei Xian, who was in the center of the encirclement. The remaining 60-some Superior Supremes seemed to have discussed this beforehand. So, they formed a human wall with a whoosh sound and blocked the path of Snake King and the others to rescue Mei Xian. This is a trap. This is a death trap for me, for Venerable Mei. Mei Xian quickly understood that they had already guessed my identity. Therefore, Half-Bodied had deliberately provoked me. Then, he had lured me into a trap. He had besieged me with all his strength. He wanted to bury me here forever. However, Mei Shuiyin would have jumped into half-bodied insults if she had known that this was a trap in advance. After all, these insults weren't something that a woman could endure. After all, they weren't something that a woman could bear. This is too vicious. It's too despicable. Mei Shuiyin shouted. Then, her body flashed at an extremely fast speed. She was able to escape from her original position with a whoosh sound. She was surrounded by 30 superior supremes. However, her body flashed away more than 20 feet in a flash. Then, she swept past 2 superior supremes. She then kicked out like a ghost. One of the superior supremes was caught off guard. He rolled away like a gourd and spouted blood from his mouth. Meanwhile, Mei Shuiyin retreated again. Then, she pushed her palms forward like lightning. Bang! Her palms collided with the palms of the 2 superior supremes. Then, she twisted her body at the same time. Her long hair fluttered behind her back like a long whip. Then, she lashed out with a bang sound. The 2 superior supremes staggered backwards after their palms collided with each other. The 2 superior supremes issued mournful screams at the same time. Then their bodies rolled to the left and they rolled to the right. Blood dripped from the ground. Mei Shuiyin's body lightly passed through the gap between the 2 superior supremes. Then, she was surrounded by a field of cold swords. Mei Shuiyin sneered. With a flick of her wrist, a bright light suddenly shone in the sky like the rising sun. Then, her body spun at a high speed. With a wung sound, a cold light condensed from the sky to the ground surrounded Mei Shuiyin. It was as if the Milky Way in the sky had formed an impenetrable wall for Mei Shuiyin. Dang, dang, dang. A series of shattering sounds rang out. The 8 superior swordsmen surrounding Mei Shuiyin retreated in shock. Only half of their swords were left in their hands. Although they already knew that the Snake King had a peerless divine weapon in his hands, how could a divine weapon be so easily obtained? Never would they have thought that not only did Mei Shuiyin have one, but from the looks of it, the quality of Mei Shuiyin's sword was even better than the one owned by the Snake King. Once they came into contact with it, everyone suffered a great loss. Any one of them had the strength of a superior supreme. How could the swords in their hands be ordinary? Which sword did not have a history? Which sword did not have the blood of millions of people? But these divine weapons, in front of the long sword in Mei Shuiyin's hand, were like snowflakes meeting the blazing sun. They could not withstand a single blow and broke into pieces. And this was far from the end. At this moment, Mei Shuiyin's killing intent was firm, and she was merciless in her attacks. She suddenly lowered her body, and with her left leg as the axis, her slender figure once again spun crazily. With a loud bang, 3 circular sword chis appeared at the same time and shot out in 3 different directions. Each direction was round and had a brilliant luster. It was resplendent and gorgeous. Each sword light seemed to be connected to the Milky Way. If one were to use the analogy of Jun Moxie's previous life, it would be like 3 laser cannons firing at the same time, and they were facing 3 different directions. Mei Shuiyin had used her full strength in this attack. She had no room to spare. Ning Wuqing, Ma Jiangming, half-bodied, Zi Jinghong, Xiao Weicheng, and the others shouted in unison. They frantically attacked to protect themselves. The remaining 20 or so people also brought out their strongest strength to resist the crazed Mei Shuiyin. The Emperor of Tian Fa had finally hardened her heart to kill. A gentleman can deceive others, but a gentleman is no longer a gentleman. And anyone who tries to use the same method to deceive others will pay a disastrous price. And that was because the Jun family had fallen into an extremely dangerous situation. Jun Zhantian, Jun Wui, Solitary Eagle, and the others had already joined the battle. The situation was precarious. Dozens of groans and screams were heard at the same time. Then, Mei Shuiyin also let out a miserable groan. She staggered back 7 or 8 steps, and blood dripped from the corners of her mouth. Blood was seeping out of many places on her body. Moreover, there were 3 deep paw marks on her back and left shoulder, There is a limit to a person's strength. The combined attack of 30 superior supremes was no small matter. Mei Shuyan was the emperor of Tian Fa. But she wasn't a match for 30 superior great masters. Under this head-on collision, he immediately suffered serious injuries. However, she didn't have a choice at this moment. The enemy's attack would come rolling in like a great river if she were to retreat. And they wouldn't stop even if she were to die from exhaustion. There are only two ways to deal with such an attack. One was to fight it head-on, and the other was to escape immediately. Mei Shuyan's current strength was unstoppable if she wanted to escape unscathed. But now, the Jun family members were all here, waiting to be slaughtered. The three Beast Kings were also here. Everyone was trapped in a bitter battle. How could Mei Shuyan just walk away from this? Therefore, she could only choose to fight it head-on. Actually, this fight was not that heavy for Mei Shuyan, who had made many breakthroughs in recent days. But what was really bad was that she hadn't experienced such a high-intensity battle for a long time. Today's sudden battle had unexpectedly caused her old injuries. This was like adding 100 pounds to one's already bad situation. The old injuries from many years ago had suddenly flared up at this critical moment. Mei Shuyan could even clearly feel that her internal organs were bleeding. The evil energy that had been corroding her for many years had also begun to rise. Mei Shuyan's heart turned cold. Could it be that today was this it? Mei Shuyan didn't have an easy time with this attack. But the experts of the three holy lands weren't having an easy time either. In fact, their injuries were far more miserable than Mei Shuyan's. The all-out attack of the Tian Fa Beast King couldn't be described as no small matter. In front of Mei Shuyan, 9 arms and 3 feet were left there with blood spurting out of them. The ground was covered with pools of blood. The white snow on the ground had already disappeared. Even the rock-hard ground had been shaved off by 5 feet. The nearest wall of the Jun family's residence had already collapsed. That wall was around 200 feet away. But it had been silently eroded by the palm wind and sword energy, and had collapsed. Half-bodied was Mei Shuyan's main target. So his ugly face had 3 more sword scars on it. His muscles had been twisted, and his white bones had been exposed. His chest was bleeding profusely. He had also been stabbed 3 times by the sword. His injuries were extremely serious. Zi Jinghong's hair was disheveled. Her purple robe was riddled with holes, and her golden silk soft armor was exposed. Several sword scars could be faintly seen on her soft armor, and a wisp of blood was flowing out of it. The crown on Xiao Weiqing's head had disappeared a long time ago. Moreover, his body was riddled with dozens of sword scars. Blood was flowing down his body like a gurgling stream, and had dyed his ash-white sackcloth robe red. Ning Wuqing was gasping for breath. His long sword was slanted towards the ground. A wisp of blood was dripping down his sword and slowly converging into a puddle on the ground. His right arm, which was holding the sword, had received a heavy cut. Ma Jiangming hadn't sustained any injuries. However, he had been standing for a while. Then he suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. This was accompanied by a faint sound of impact. However, a closer look revealed that 5 or 6 teeth had been mixed in the blood. The scene had turned quiet for a moment after this earth-shattering attack had ended. Everyone's eyes were either looking at Mei Shuyan or at the severed limbs on the ground. Then, they looked at the bedraggled appearance of the leaders, and they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. In fact, it felt as if a poisonous snake had quietly crawled on their backs. A chill seeped into their bones. Chapter 546. Among the group of people who attacked, there were many people who belonged to Hermitage who had participated in the battle against Mei Shuyan. At this moment, they all had a clear feeling that the current Venerable Mei was completely different from the Venerable Mei of many years ago. A gentleman can deceive others. Venerable may have been worried about the battle for seizing the heavens at that time. So, the benevolent and kind-hearted Venerable Mei wouldn't have used such a heavy and decisive move. Everyone would have been able to guarantee that they wouldn't have to worry about their lives, even if the situation of the battle had become even more tragic. And this had naturally made everyone even more unscrupulous in their attacks. However, Venerable May was as ruthless as she could be today. In fact, it seemed as if she wished that she could kill everyone with a single slash of her sword. Without a doubt, the current Venerable May, this Venerable May, was more than twice as frightening as the gentleman Venerable May of the past. Furthermore, they had also misjudged the strength of Venerable May, and it was a serious mistake. As long as one had participated in the battle that year, they would know how serious the injuries that Venerable May had suffered. Even if he had used all his strength to recuperate all these years, it would already be considered very good if he could recover to the strength he had back then. As for improving his strength, it would probably be impossible. Even if Venerable May was the Beast King of Tian Fa, he would not be an exception. In fact, this was an important factor in the plan that the three Holy Lands had formulated to eradicate the Tian Fa forest. However, Venerable May's old injuries seemed to have completely healed. In fact, her skills had even improved by leaps and bounds. And the most frightening thing about her was that her speed had increased by leaps and bounds. In fact, her speed had increased by leaps and bounds. In fact, she was much faster than before. Before this, Mei Shuiyan's speed was already the fastest in the world. Now that he had increased his speed, what kind of terrifying speed was this? No one dared to imagine. Fortunately, he had created a delicate situation where she couldn't escape alone. Otherwise, the 30 of them wouldn't have been able to stop her. In this hopeless situation, no matter how fast her speed was, or how much her cultivation had improved, they had a total of 30 supreme martial artists and above on their side. Even if they were to grind her to death, they would still be able to grind her to death. How could Mei Shuiyan be willing to leave now that the Jun family and the three Beast Kings were here to restrain her? As long as she did not leave, she would definitely die. Fortunately, she was going to die today. Otherwise, how would she be able to sleep at night? Could a gentleman still be deceived? Half-Bodied roared in a malevolent manner. He took the lead and shouted, "Go!" Everyone attacked together. This slut was already seriously injured and wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Bleeding alone would be enough to kill her. Kill them all. Today, I will personally tear open her stomach and take out her Xiandan. I want to see what kind of monster she is. She thinks that she's a human after taking the form of a human. In the end, she isn't a beast. Mei Shuiyan closed her eyes. Her fairy-like face was still calm and indifferent. Then, she slowly spoke in a voice that sounded like the sounds of nature. Half-bodied. I will take your life, even if I have to die today. You say that I'm a beast? But you're an out-and-out beast. Half-bodied laughed heartily. He only had one eye and one hand. His face was distorted and looked even more ferocious than before. Blood was flowing down his face as he spoke with a malevolent look in his eyes. Do you think that you can still do it in your current state? Venerable May, don't tell me that you're so confident in bed just because you found a little man. Haha, this old man isn't in a hurry to kill you now that you've said that. This old man will capture you alive. Then, I'll capture that pretty boy Jun Moxie. I'll make the two of you put on a live erotic show. I'm sure that everyone in the world will be very curious about how the Venerable May will behave in bed after she's shamelessly found a little man. Perhaps I'll castrate your little man in front of you. Then, I'll show you the elegance of an old man. Do you want to look forward to it? Ha ha ha. You're shameless. You deserve to die. Mei Shuiyan's pretty face was filled with murderous intentions. She clenched her teeth and raised her long sword. Then, the sword energy filled the sky. Zi Jinghong, half-bodied, and Xiao Weicheng simultaneously roared, "Kill them!" All the experts shouted at the same time. Then, they raised their swords and charged forward. The sword light was like a forest, and the sword energy was like a tide. Mei Shuiyan's lonely figure seemed so lonely in front of these 30 or so superior supreme level experts. Mei Shuiyan slightly closed her eyes. Then, a gentle smile appeared on her blood-stained lips. Fortunately, I didn't see his figure among these people. It seems that he has chosen an opportunity to escape. It's fine as long as he stays alive. My sacrifice won't be in vain. It's a pity that I won't be able to see him again. Elder sister. Qian Sun's serpent queen crazily brandished the Snake King's sword. She then roared in a heart-wrenching manner. She crazily rushed over. Jun Tian and Jun Wui were attacking with all their strength. They were brandishing their long swords in a bold manner. In fact, they were putting their lives on the line. However, their strength was far inferior to that of their enemies. In fact, they would have been defeated and captured a long time ago if it weren't for the fact that Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyin had gone all out to protect them. And if it weren't for the extraordinary weapons in their hands, however, they had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. In fact, it was only a matter of time before they were defeated or even captured. In fact, the experts of the three holy lands would have submerged these four people if it weren't for the fact that these two people of the Jun family were related to the whereabouts of the divine pills. However, they were only trying their best not to injure them. After all, they wanted to extract important information from their mouths. And that was because everyone knew that these Beast Kings of Tian Fa, especially the Beast King Venerable Mei, could only be killed. In fact, there was no hope of capturing them alive. Once they were all dead, the divine pills could only fall into the hands of these two people from the Jun family. Jun Tian staggered backwards with blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. Jun Wui's sword was sharp, but he was also clumsy. Finally, he managed to break the weapons of three enemies. Then, he swung his sword to injure another person's waist. However, he was struck squarely in the abdomen by a palm at the same time, causing him to tumble down. His face had already turned ashen, and he no longer had any strength to fight. However, Third Master Jun's eyes were still wide open in anger. However, he was not afraid at all. It seemed like only Jun Moxie had yet to rush out of the Jun family. As long as the bloodline of the Jun family still existed in this world, Jun Tian and Jun Wui had nothing to fear. As hot-blooded men, they had no regrets, even if they had to die 9 times. Boss! Bear Mountain and Earthcracker's eyes were wide open. Ignoring the punches and kicks that were landing on their bodies, they charged wildly toward Mei Xuyin. Go back! Mei Xuyin's complexion was calm as she issued an order in a stern voice. However, the attacks arrived from all directions at this moment. Mei Xuyin laughed heartily. Her white clothes fluttered in the wind as she rushed forward without any regard for her life. I must kill half-bodied first, even if I have to die. This man had given me the heaviest blow many years ago, and he's doing everything he can to humiliate me and his people. Kill. I must kill half-bodied. This lowly bastard must die. Hai Chen-feng and Song Shang roared from all sides. Bailey Luo Yun and the other two led the Heaven Destroyers and Spirit Devourers and rushed forward together. The battle had reached its final moment. So, they had to die at this moment, even if they were to die. 300 Xian beast crossbows were fired at the same time, and the arrows fell like rain. The Heaven Destroyers and Spirit Devourers' sturdy bodies rushed forward with an angry shout. They weren't afraid of death at all. Housekeeper Old Pang led the Jun family's guards and rushed out from the other side at the same time. These people were facing a great master-level expert. Moreover, they were facing a great master-level expert. In fact, every single one of them knew about this. They knew that there was no chance of survival if they rushed forward. However, they had received the Jun family's kindness for a long time. So, their hearts were unyielding. So, they wouldn't allow themselves to escape at this time. If I die, I die. Everyone died together. In this group of people who were ready to die, a tall and sturdy figure rushed to the front. His hair was as white as silver, and his head was like that of a tiger or a leopard. He roared like thunder and strode forward as if he was flying. Jun Tian, this old man will live and die with you. It was Duga Zongheng. This old man had been recuperating in the Jun family for a long time. His body had finally recovered from his illness, but he had been caught up in this calamity. Everyone else would have been too late to avoid it, but This old man was faster than anyone else. The two old men had worked together for a lifetime, and their grudges had been entangled for 60 years. But Dugu Zongheng had made his choice without any hesitation at this critical moment. Live and die together, live and die together. Dugu Zongheng would feel that he had failed his entire life if he were to abandon Jun Zhan Tian today. He would not be happy for the rest of his life. I, Dugu Zongheng, am not one to run away in the face of battle. Therefore, Old Man Dugu took the lead and rushed out. Nearly 1,000 people rushed out like a swarm of bees. Their eyes were blood red as they desperately rushed forward. They were facing a great expert who was 1,000 times stronger than them. But they were fearless in their suicidal charge. Everyone had a heroic look of despair on their faces. But they had no regrets. Heroes have no regrets. They were only willing to wait for the enemy's sword to stab them, and then let their hot blood gush out. And it dyed the snowy ground under their feet red. This charge wasn't to protect the country. It wasn't to save people in danger. In fact, it wasn't even for any other purpose. It didn't have any other purpose. It was only to seek death. Death was death. Perhaps it was just a moment of hot-headedness. Perhaps it was just a moment of impulsiveness. But who would care about anything else when their hot blood was surging? The Jun family was able to make so many people follow them into madness, and they were unafraid of death. The charm of the Jun family was clear to see. Even if it was just a moment of hot-headedness and impulsiveness, it was still the most precious thing in this world. It had nothing to do with life or death. It had nothing to do with honor or disgrace. It had nothing to do with loyalty. A gentleman will die for his bosom friend. At this moment, this sentence was the best interpretation. Even the great master-level experts of the three Holy Lands were somewhat stunned by such a heroic scene. What kind of magic does the Jun family have to make so many people willingly die for them? No regrets. No regrets, even in death. Moreover, they didn't know that the Jun family's manpower was relatively small because of the sudden incident. In fact, it didn't even need a lot of time. In fact, they could have increased the number of people courting death by 100-fold in just one day's time. There would have been too many people like these people. They wouldn't have hesitated to use their own flesh and blood to welcome the cold steel swords. But this wasn't important. These people were unafraid of death, but their strength was too weak. The strongest among them was only Tian Xian's strength, and they were using this kind of strength to break through the defensive line formed by the great master-level experts. It was like a mayfly trying to shake a tree and a mantis trying to stop a chariot. They were courting death. Chapter 547. Second update. Which one of the experts of the three Holy Lands isn't a veteran of hundreds of battles? They are vicious and merciless, and they kill people like flies. Which one of them hasn't crawled out a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood? So, why would they care about a small massacre of 1,000 people? None of them moved. They just stood in place, and a cold light was emitting from their eyes. They were waiting for the arrival of these suicidal people. In fact, some of them were calculating in their hearts. They believed that they would only need 4 or 5 breaths worth of time to kill these reckless idiots if they were to attack with all their strength. There's no room for mercy between life and death. We acknowledge your loyalty and bravery, and we will even sigh for you afterwards. However, you will only show death in front of us. The murderous intention was burning in the eyes of the great master-level experts. The tide of people was getting closer and closer. Jun Zhan Tian's mouth was overflowing with blood. He looked at his men charging towards him with no fear of death. A trace of heartfelt pain flashed in his eyes, and 2 drops of tears rolled down his face. He knew that it would be futile no matter how he tried to dissuade them. Good. Let this old man take you to the underworld to fight for a big piece of land. Jun Zhan Tian roared. His voice shook the world, and a despairing and tragic aura suddenly filled the space between heaven and earth. Kill. The 2 sides were about to come into contact with each other at this critical moment. The world had been filled with the sounds of killing, and the sounds of weapons colliding. But it had suddenly sunk into a deathly silence. An abundant and continuous, imposing aura seemed to have surged up from the end of the world. It had appeared abruptly, and had filled the entire sky and earth in less than 1/10 of the time it took to blink. It seemed as if the world was collapsing. It seemed as if a tsunami had reached the sky. It was so abundant that it couldn't be resisted. Even top experts like Mei Shuiyan, half-bodied, and Zi Jinghong had the same feeling at this moment. The sky has collapsed. The earth has caved in. Is the end of the world coming? That was because it was an extremely heavy and powerful pressure. In fact, it seemed as if the entire blue dome of heaven had collapsed. It was filled with boundless violence and endless murderous intention. This was the ultimate and most terrifying power of the world. No human could contend against this kind of power. No one gave any orders. Everyone remained in their original positions, frozen in place. In fact, many people's swords had already been slashed out and were about to collide with each other in the next moment, but all of them stopped in midair at the same time. No one knew what was going on. Was this an unusual change in the heavens and the earth? Or was it the sudden arrival of an ultimate powerhouse that was so strong that it was impossible to resist? If it was done by someone, then what kind of person was he? Suddenly, a voice said slowly, "Is this how the three holy lands protect the common people? Isn't this a little too despicable?" This voice was very flat and calm, but was like a sudden clap of thunder, suddenly exploding in everyone's mind. Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice and saw a large black robe fluttering in the wind and snow above the June family's tower. However, for some reason, this black robe seemed as heavy as a mountain in the eyes of the people from the three holy lands. It was difficult to bear. Everyone could clearly feel that extremely powerful and terrifying pressure. One's moves could be faked, and one's appearance could be faked. However, the only thing that couldn't be faked since ancient times was one's aura. One's aura depended on one's cultivation. For example, an expert like Tian Xian would unconsciously release his aura when he was attacked from the outside. Moreover, he wouldn't release the aura of Shen Xian, nor would he release the aura of an Earth Xian. The aura that a Sky Xian expert could display was the truest portrayal of one's strength. This was a common understanding. This had been the case since ancient times. There had never been an exception. The frightening aura of this black-clothed man had obviously reached a height that no one dared to imagine. He was absolutely invincible in this world. Half-bodied, Zi Jinghong and Xiao Weicheng looked at each other and saw the uneasiness in each other's eyes. The three of them had the same feeling. This man is several levels stronger than the strongest person present, Venerable Mei. In fact, he's even stronger. I believe that even the 90 experts who have come today wouldn't necessarily be a match for this man. How can there be such a godlike and demon-like existence in this world? Such a person is too terrifying. Half-bodied, waved his hand, and the people of the three holy lands retreated like a tide. They quickly formed a circle and reorganized their formation. They then gathered their strength. Mei Shuiyan's body flashed, and she retreated to meet up with Snake King and the others. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun supported Junjian Tian and Jun Wui. Then everyone slowly gathered together. Hai Chun Feng and the others led their men in front of them to block their path. They formed a thick human wall. "May I dare to ask who your excellency is? Why have you appeared here at this time? You must be here for something. Our three holy lands are doing everything for the sake of the common people and the future of the continent. Our methods may not be honorable, but we have a clear conscience." Zi Jinghong cupped her hands in obeisance. Her words were full of righteousness, but her demeanor was modest and amiable. Strong people were supposed to be respected by others. A strong person like the man in black was even more so a strong person at the peak. Even Zi Jinghong, who was the third most powerful person in the illusory ocean of blood, couldn't help but be in awe of him. "Me? He. The black-clothed man laughed twice. Then he said in a sinister manner, it seems that the world has forgotten me since I haven't appeared for a long time. I have to say that the forgetfulness of humans is very powerful. And you still dare to claim that you have a clear conscience after doing such a despicable thing? This old man has lived for so many years. But I've broadened my horizons today. Justice is in the hearts of the people. So it's useless to argue. But please forgive me for not recognizing an expert. Xi Jinghong looked up at the top of the pagoda. I request your excellency to bestow upon me your background. Bestow upon me my background. Do you think I'll be able to get back at you later? The three holy lands are indeed the three holy lands. As expected, they can't be intimidated. The black-clothed man shook his head with a sigh. He seemed to be very emotional. No one could tell if he was praising or mocking Chu Yang. He continued. This old man had punished the so-called second great master in the Tian Fa forest. But it seems that I wasn't intimidating enough. Do you want to know my background? Sure, as long as you have the strength. As he said that, the black-clothed man stretched his right leg forward. His body moved along with his left leg. He was already standing in the air. His footsteps didn't stop. Suddenly, he walked down from the top of the pagoda with his hands behind his back. It was as if he was walking down a flight of stairs. Just this move alone made the eyebrows of all the experts twitch wildly. Everyone could use their xianqi to leap to a certain height. Many people could even reach a height that was higher than the pagoda. Jumping down safely from this height was not a problem. In fact, it could even be done by floating down slowly. However, this black-clothed man in front of them was walking down in a leisurely manner. This was simply a myth. However, this wasn't the only mystical thing. Every time that black-clothed man stepped in the air, a clear thump sound would be heard. He was walking down step by step from a height of more than 100 feet. Those clear thump sounds were like muffled thunder that struck the hearts of the people from the three holy lands. Such an unimaginable power couldn't be seen with one's own eyes. In fact, it didn't even exist in the legends. The miracle that was happening before their eyes had obviously exceeded the scope of everyone's understanding. Does he think that the air under his feet is solid? The black-clothed man's every word and sentence made everyone's hearts beat wildly. So he's Jun Moxie's mysterious master. He's the mysterious expert who had burned Li Ju Tian to death in Tian Fa. It could be said that this was the largest gathering of the continent's top experts in the last 10 million years. Not only were there great masters, but there were also 30 great masters who were above the great master level. However, who among so many people could say that they could kill Li Ju Tian in one move? In fact, there weren't many who could defeat him. Li Ju Tian's strength was infinitely close to surpassing the great master level. Otherwise, how could he have had the opportunity to come in contact with an existence like Hermitage? He could kill a great master level expert in one move. That was impossible. In fact, it was unimaginable. However, this impossible existence had appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In fact, it had appeared in front of 90 experts from the three holy lands. So your excellency is Jun Moxie's master? Xi Jinghong's pupils shrank. In fact, the people from the three holy lands had long known that Jun Moxie's mysterious master was an exceptionally powerful and unfathomable expert. But they hadn't expected that he would be unfathomable to such an extent. That's right. I'm not only Jun Moxie's master, but I'm also the person you're looking for, the black-robed man spoke in a calm tone. I'm the one who refined the elixirs. I'm the person you've come here to look for. I'm the person you're planning to capture and use as a tool for refining the elixirs. Boom! Everyone's hearts were shaken. Some of them couldn't help but tremble. They looked at the formidable black-robed man in front of them and secretly muttered in their hearts. We've hit an iron plate this time. My lord, what are you three leaders thinking? You want us to capture such a tyrannical and heaven-defying person? I won the Silver Blizzard City that day. But the Silver Blizzard City was very obedient and didn't come for a long time. Even if they did come to visit, they would only greet us warmly. They're very tactful. The black-robed man's voice was calm, but there was a hint of ridicule in it as he continued. But the three holy lands aren't the same. Not only have they come, but they've come with great momentum. They've come with a murderous aura. I'm afraid that the June family will be destroyed if I don't show myself. There are also many innocent people who have died tragically for the sake of the common people and the future of the continent. This makes this old man very unhappy. Chapter 548. The third chapter. There was more to come. Zi Jinghong laughed dryly and said, "Senior, you don't have to be like this. It's said that the ignorant can't be blamed. We didn't know that you were here in the June family. That's why we had this misunderstanding. However, the three holy lands have a heavy responsibility on their shoulders. I'm sure that Senior is aware of this. The war for seizing the heavens will begin in a few years. The outcome of the war will be hard to predict. Everything will be fine if we win, but the entire continent will be plunged into misery and suffering if we lose." He paused for a moment before continuing with a serious and righteous expression. "I'm afraid that no one would be able to bear such a severe consequence. And today, many of the people from the three holy lands would be participating in this tournament. So, in order to increase their own strength and ensure the victory of the war, they had no choice but to do this. How could the suffering of a single family be compared to the suffering of the entire world? Moreover, the peerless divine pill that Senior has refined is precisely a miraculous spirit pill that all profounders yearn for even in their dreams. Not only is it able to improve one's cultivation, it even has the miraculous effect of changing one's physique. That's why we've come presumptuously to ask for Senior's help. We hope that Senior will generously agree to help us, and it would be the fortune of the common people and the world." It had to be said that Zi Jinghong's few words were not only clear and logical, but neither servile nor overbearing. In an instant, he had cleared himself of all the despicable acts that he had committed. He had even raised this despicable act to the level of for the world. That wasn't the end of it. He even made it clear that all of them would be participating in the war for seizing the heavens in the future. So what if you have terrifying strength? In any case, you can't touch us. If you touch us, you'll be the sinner of humanity. What a sharp-tongued brat. If I didn't know that you guys are preparing for the war for seizing the heavens, and that many people are going to participate in this battle, do you think you guys can still stand here and talk? Do you really think this old man only knows how to talk? The black-robed man rolled his eyes and said in an awe-inspiring manner. After saying this, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and made a grabbing motion. 3 or 4 broken swords on the ground seemed to be guided by something and flew into his hand with a whoosh. Although this controlling crane-capturing dragon was a brilliant move, it was something that everyone could do. There was nothing special about it. With just this one move, the evaluation of the black-robed man in everyone's hearts dropped rapidly. The group of experts felt strange. Could it be that you can scare us with such an ordinary move? If it weren't for your extraordinary aura, we would have already swarmed you. If you can't take out something new to shock everyone, a battle is inevitable. Maybe the void descent was just a weird camouflage. Just as everyone was in doubt and contemplation, they saw the black-robed man opposite them sneer coldly. He flipped his sleeves, and a fair right hand stretched out. 2 of his fingers gently lifted the tip of a broken sword and slowly extended it out. While everyone was puzzled, they were shocked to see the broken sword suddenly turn into a noodle. It flipped left and right, and then a drop of silver liquid dripped onto the ground in front of everyone's eyes. Then the second drop, the third. Zi Jinghong had goosebumps all over her body. He only felt a chill at the back of his head, because right under his eyes, the broken sword slowly shrank from big to small, from long to short, slowly turning into drops of silver molten iron, disappearing in the hands of the black-robed man. This was too terrifying, too incredible, and infinitely terrifying. Zi Jinghong was standing the closest to the black-robed man, but he still did not notice the slightest movement of the black-robed man. He also did not notice any abnormality in his chi. He just stood there calmly, but that broken sword that had been tempered 100 times was gone just like that. It had melted among these people, none of them were mediocre. The swords and sabers in the hands of these experts would naturally not be made of ordinary copper and iron. Even the broken ones on the ground, the worst ones were tempered 100 times, not to mention burning them with magic. Even if they were thrown into a big furnace and burned for 3 days and 3 nights, they might not be able to be refined. But the black-robed man in front of them did it so easily. He only touched it with 2 fingers, and he did it. It was shocking. Behind Xi Jinghong, everyone sucked in a breath of air in unison. Many of them were afraid. Fortunately, they were just suspicious just now. If they were hot-headed and said 1 or 2 words of doubt, there would only be one result: death. Moreover, they would have died in vain. No one would have helped them seek justice. Seeking justice from such a powerhouse was a truly idiotic act. You're lucky. You haven't killed many people yet. But this old man will make an exception today, since you're here for the war for seizing the heavens. Moreover, you'll be participating in it later on. So, this old man will make an exception for you today, the black-robed man said magnanimously. No matter what, this old man is also a part of this continent. So, I won't destroy you even if I don't contribute. You can go now. Xi Jinghong's face revealed an awkward expression. Half-bodied, and Xiao Wei Chung looked at each other in dismay. They were in a dilemma. They were on the verge of accomplishing a great feat today. They had destroyed the Jun family and had even slaughtered the 4 beast kings. But this mysterious powerhouse had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, he was so strong that they were no match for him. So, it could be said that he was very magnanimous to let everyone go. But wouldn't it be very shameful if they listened to him and retreated? How would they survive in the future? There were 90 experts from the 3 holy lands. So, they had to abandon all their goals and actions just because a man had come out and spoken a few words. And they had to leave with their tails between their legs. This would be a fatal blow to the reputation of the 3 holy lands. Moreover, they had already formed an irreconcilable enmity with the Xian beasts of Tian Fa, especially the Venerable Mei. So, the Venerable Mei wouldn't be as lenient as he had been in the past. Her terrifying speed and astonishing strength were enough to make most of the people present restless, even if they weren't as intimidating as this mysterious black-robed man. But what was the point of staying here if they didn't leave? Senior must be aware that we've been ordered to come here, and we'll be blamed if we return empty-handed. So, we'll certainly give you face, even if we have to bear some blame for your sake. However, Senior possesses such peerless skills. Moreover, you're even capable of refining heaven-defying pills. So, I wonder if you can help us in the war for seizing the heavens? The common people of the world will forever be grateful to you, even if you only take out some pills. Senior, you're also a part of the Xian continent. So, it's not a big deal for you to help us. Please, Senior. Everyone's eyes lit up as they waited for the black-robed man's reply. They weren't afraid that this old man wouldn't give in. Just because I'm giving you some color, you want it to be red? The common people of the world are your responsibility. It's not my responsibility. So, what does it have to do with me? The black-robed man rolled his eyes and suddenly laughed coldly. Because of my pills, you guys mobilized in large numbers and wanted to rob me along with the pills. You even barged into my disciple's house and caused a bloodbath. If not for this old man's sudden appearance, the entire Jun family would have been destroyed by you guys. Now that I'm here, you guys feel that you can't afford to offend me. So, you want this old man to give you the pills for the common people of the world? The common people of the world? Do you have that much face? He laughed strangely. His voice became colder and colder. I think for the common people of the world. But when did the common people of the world think for me? You want me to help you? You're not even my sons. Why should I help you? Brat, have you taken the wrong medicine? Do you not have a brain? Or is your brain moldy? This peerless expert was undoubtedly the #1 expert of the world. However, he had unexpectedly opened his mouth to curse. Everyone hadn't expected such a thing to happen. So, they looked at each other in dismay. They couldn't help but be startled. Half-bodied was the most irascible among these people. He couldn't help but get angry when he saw the black-robed man insult them. He then said in a stern voice, "I'm calling you senior because I respect you. Don't push your luck. Our three holy lands aren't easy to bully. Our three holy lands represent the future of the entire Xian continent. You're amazing, but can you fight against the entire world?" This old man obviously can't fight against the entire world. The three holy lands aren't easy to bully. Of course, the three holy lands have always been the ones to bully others. So, when have they ever been bullied by others? But how come I don't know when the three holy lands have started to represent the future of the continent? The black-robed man ridiculed him. Then, his tone suddenly sank as he said, "You're half-bodied?" Half-bodied heard the man's unfriendly tone. So, he couldn't help but get angry as he replied, "What do you want?" "I want to tell you that the three holy lands represent the future of the Xian continent." "I don't want to tell you anything. This old man wants to tell you that everyone else can leave. But you can't. You're an animal, and you don't deserve to live in this world. It would be a disgrace to this old man if I let a piece of trash like you exist in this world." A murderous intention flashed in the black-robed man's eyes. Then, his majestic, imposing aura spread out once again. The black-robed man was none other than Jun Moxie. He had started to make preparations after he had heard Li Yuan's warning. In fact, he had been thinking about how to deal with this crisis. This crisis was no small matter. In fact, the entire Jun family would be uprooted if they weren't careful. In fact, even Mei Shuiyin and the others from Tian Fa wouldn't be able to escape. Simply relying on scaring people wouldn't work. But it would be even more impossible to confront them head-on. Jun Moxie's hair had turned white from worry in just a short time. Jun Moxie had finally decided to adopt this same old method after he had pondered for half a night. He had decided to take the risk. However, he had to increase his strength by a lot this time. Therefore, Jun Moxie had entered the Hongjun Pagoda as soon as the sky had turned dark. Then, he had tried his best to link his spiritual power with the Hongjun Pagoda. However, Jun Moxie had decided to pour his entire spiritual power into the Hongjun Pagoda this time. He was going to use his greatest effort in exchange for the highest return from the Hongjun Pagoda. This was tantamount to putting his life on the line. However, Jun Moxie had no choice but to make this choice. There was a chance of success if he did it, but he could only sit and wait for death if he didn't do it. Jun Moxie had finally completed this transformation before midnight. This time was completely different from the past. Chapter 549. Because the previous few times, Jun Moxie had only been borrowing it. Most of his spiritual energy was still used to protect himself. But this time, he had used it without holding back. It was still borrowing, but this time, it was equivalent to the Hongjun Pagoda borrowing Jun Moxie. And it was all in one go. This was the greatest game of life and death. At this moment, Jun Moxie was walking on a tightrope at a high altitude every minute and every second. His spiritual energy had been used to the limit, and there was no way to protect himself. If he was not careful, he would be smashed to pieces. But Jun Moxie had no other choice. He could only stake it all on one throw. Fortunately, he succeeded, and this time he had successfully shocked the entire audience. In fact, this was reasonable. After all, this was the purest energy of the Hongjun Pagoda. Although Jun Moxie did not know how much of the Hongjun Pagoda strength he had borrowed, he could clearly feel that even though he was using his entire body as a vessel, he was still far from reaching the Hongjun Pagoda's limit. If he was borrowing a planet, then the Hongjun Pagoda was the entire universe. Jun Moxie actually had such a vast feeling. Even Jun Mo Xie himself was indescribably shocked by the might of such an ancient divine object. But as his strength increased, he felt that he was actually so insignificant. Then, Jun Moxie activated the yin-yang escape and walked down from the top of the pagoda. It was another level of intimidation. The opponents were all old foxes with over 100 years of wisdom. They would not be scared off by a few words. Jun Moxie was already prepared for this. So, after he threatened them, he saw that they were still skeptical. So, he immediately started the third wave of intimidation. The power of gold. Just like that, a divine weapon melted into molten iron in the blink of an eye. At this point, Jun Mo Xie could be said to have made up his mind. These three world-shocking divine skills had completely shocked the entire audience. Therefore, Jun Moxie immediately suggested for them to withdraw. Jun Moxie wanted to kill all of these people more than anyone else. However, he did not have the ability to do so at the moment. Even if he fought with his life on the line, he would not be able to do it. If he really caused the crowd to be agitated, everyone would attack regardless of the consequences, and his act would be exposed immediately. Therefore, Jun Moxie couldn't make a move, and he couldn't push them too hard. If there were any changes, then today would truly be a tragedy. There were thousands of people in the Jun family. Only Jun Mo Xie had the ability to escape. Everyone else would have to stay here. Even Mei Shuiyan wouldn't be an exception. However, Half-Bodied had suddenly jumped out of nowhere when the opposite party was about to admit defeat. Man proposes, but God disposes. Therefore, Jun Moxie gritted his teeth. No matter what, he had to kill this fellow. He had insulted Mei Shuiyan a moment ago. So this guy shouldn't be allowed to live. Jun Moxie had intended to trick them into leaving first. Then, he would join hands with Mei Shuiyan to find another time to settle accounts with Half-Bodied. But he had jumped out of nowhere. So, Jun Moxie had decided to use him to show his might once again. This was the fourth intimidation. This was going to be the most thorough and unforgettable shock. And this was going to be the most crucial one. The first 3 times had shocked everyone, but they hadn't been able to scare them away. Only after this time, after the decisive shock, would he be able to make these bastards leave happily. However, the Jun family would be annihilated if the intimidation failed. There would be no luck involved. Therefore, this was going to be a great risk. The reason was the same as before. Jun Moxie had no choice but to take this gamble. He was a super expert at the moment. So, it would be tantamount to nothing if he remained indifferent in the face of such provocation. Therefore, Jun Moxie had no way out. Half-Bodied must die. Half-Bodied let out a long and shrill cry as he spoke up in a stern voice. I respect you as a senior. So, I speak to you in a friendly manner. But you insult me? Do you think that I'm afraid of you? This old man doesn't care whether you're afraid of this old man or not. This old man has decided to kill you. Jun Moxie coldly snorted and shouted, Half-Bodied, there's no point in living since you're only left with half of you. So, this old man will send this half of you on your way. Go and accompany your other half. Suddenly, his body floated forward without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. Half-Bodied looked somewhat restless as he turned his only eye. But he discovered that Zi Jinghong and Xiao Wei-Chung had both taken 2 steps back. They were looking at him with an expression that said, Go and try it. Half-Bodied calmed down. He knew that they wouldn't abandon him. After all, he knew that they wouldn't abandon him as long as he could withstand the first wave of this mysterious man's attack. After all, this mysterious man had killed Li Ju-Tian, who was close to the peak of the great master level, with a single strike. But he might not be able to kill Half-Bodied since he had already reached the great master level. Everyone will have the courage to besiege him as long as I can withstand a single strike without getting injured. Half-Bodied's courage grew as he thought of this. He suddenly roared and stamped his foot. He took the lead and jumped out. Then he crossed his palm and rolled up his left sleeve. The sound of wind whistled like a soft whip. Then he swept his left sleeve towards the black-robed man. After all, he was still afraid of the mysterious strength of the opposite party. So, he didn't dare to use his right hand to attack. So, he had to attack with his left sleeve. After all, it would only be a sleeve if he were to lose it. However, he would be done for if his right hand were to be crippled by the opposite party. Therefore, he had poured his entire strength into his right hand. He was ready to withdraw at any time. In fact, he had even transformed the strength of his right hand into a kind of reverse force that could stimulate his own body. In fact, he would rather suffer internal injuries in order to use the reverse force to escape if he couldn't escape unscathed. He had made all these arrangements in order to block the first wave of the mysterious man's attack. That was all. It had to be said that Jun Moxie had disguised himself as the Black-Robed Man, and his earth-shattering, imposing aura had given Half-Bodied a huge shock. However, this was exactly what Jun Moxie wanted him to do. Half-Bodied would have created a lot of trouble for Jun Moxie if he had attacked with all his strength. In fact, he would have been able to launch a deadly counterattack. After all, his true strength was far superior to Jun Moxie's. In fact, only Mei Shuiyin could have won against him. Fortunately, he didn't dare to do so. The distance between the two sides wasn't that far, so they had come close to each other in an instant. Jun Moxie had come forward in a leisurely manner. However, Half-Bodied was much more nervous and restrained in comparison. In fact, his face had even started to break out in cold sweat. Mei Shuiyin and the others had the same expression as Zi Jinghong and the others. They had gathered all of their spirit power and had spread out their spirit sense to observe this fight. The strength of the Black-Robed Man would be revealed after this fight. This moment would determine the fate of the entire Jun family. Half-Bodied's single eye saw that the Black-Robed Man's eyes were as deep as the ocean. He had obviously prepared himself for this. However, he still panicked for some reason. So, he waved his left sleeve and swatted it towards Jun Moxie's chest. However, the mysterious man had mysteriously disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. In fact, he had disappeared in front of Half-Bodied's eyes. Everyone was left startled. They had used all of their spirit sense to probe. However, they hadn't been able to detect anything. Could it be that the Black-Robed Man has disappeared? Half-Bodied suddenly issued a mournful and shrill scream. It sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Then, he rose 100 feet into the air. His scream was very miserable. It seemed as if his heart and liver had been torn out of his body. Everyone stared at him and couldn't help but be left dumbstruck. Half-Bodied's sole foot was still in the air, and a black flame was burning at a moderate pace. Half-Bodied screamed miserably. He tried his best to raise his arms in midair. He wanted to use the hurricane he had created to extinguish the black flame. However, the black flame wasn't affected by his speed. In fact, it was burning at a moderate pace. Everyone present had sharp eyesight, so they could see that Half-Bodied's foot had been shortened by 1/3 in an instant. 1/3 of Half-Bodied's flesh and bones had been burned away in the blink of an eye. Half-Bodied screamed miserably. Then, he suddenly fell down. He couldn't bear the pain and extreme fear he was feeling. So, he wrapped his right hand in his Xian energy and pounced towards the black flame. However, Half-Bodied screams became even more miserable the moment his right hand touched the black flame. Half-Bodied's entire body started to tremble. His single eye had almost popped out of its socket due to the pain. In fact, blue veins had started to bulge on his forehead. All 5 of his fingers had caught fire. It was still the same pitch-black flame. The flame of primal chaos could burn wood. It could burn water. It could burn metal. It could burn soil. It could burn air. There was nothing in the world that the flame of primal chaos couldn't burn. Half-Bodied fell to the ground with a smacking sound. The black flame on his foot had already reached his thigh, and the black flame on his hand had already reached his shoulder. However, the flame was neither fast nor slow. It was slowly and elegantly dancing. In fact, it seemed as if he was performing a mysterious aristocratic dance. But it also seemed as if he was performing a mysterious religious ceremony. Everyone opened their eyes wide and their mouths wide open. Half-Bodied was struggling in the fire and pain. His entire body was convulsing. The flame of primal chaos had burned his tendons and made them contract in an intense manner. His body was also twitching with every passing moment. However, the flames hadn't reached his vital parts, so he wouldn't die for some time. Clang! Ning Wuqing unsheathed his sword. His body and sword became one. Then he streaked across the sky like a rainbow. He slashed at Half-Bodied's shoulder twice, and he slashed at Half-Body's thigh. He had cut off these two places that were on fire. Your thinking is too simple. Do you think it's that easy? An extremely indifferent voice resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone looked at the place where Half-Bodied had been standing a moment ago. Then, a black shadow suddenly emerged from the ground. It was the Black-Robed Man. However, no one understood why he had suddenly reappeared when he had clearly disappeared. After all, he had clearly disappeared. Then, he looked at Ning Wuching with pity in his eyes. Then, he slowly said, "I want to kill someone. So, I'll kill him even if you cripple him." He stretched out his hands after he had said this. Then, two pitch-black flames appeared on his hands. The wind and snow were whistling in the sky. These two black flames seemed like the gates of hell that had been opened in this pitch-black night. These flames were much bigger than the ones on Half-Body's body. In fact, they looked like two fiery dragons that were swaying in the snowy night. Chapter 550. Ning Wuching's complexion changed as he retreated 2 steps. His hands and feet were trembling. How could he have the slightest interest in tasting the sword after seeing Half-Body's miserable condition? Suddenly, he heard several people in his own camp cry out in alarm. "Ning Wuching, abandon your sword." Ning Wuching was startled. He lowered his head to look, and his soul almost left his body. He hastily let go of the sword, and it fell to the ground with a clang sound. He saw that a small mass of black fire was slowly spreading from the edge of the sword. In fact, it had already burned a small part of the sword's tip. He had chopped off Half-Body's arm and thigh. So, the tip of the sword had come into contact with the black fire, and it had unknowingly started to burn. The most frightening thing was that this black fire didn't emit any sound or heat. However, it could even burn metal. If it hadn't been for the reminder of his comrades, Ning Wuching's complexion turned as white as a sheet of paper. He was filled with lingering fear. "I'm afraid that the sword will burn my hand in the blink of an eye if I carry it back, right?" Then, he couldn't help but shudder as he thought of Half-Body's miserable condition. Ning Wuching felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart as he saw the black fire slowly engulfing the sword on the ground. "This is my most beloved weapon." He looked at Half-Bodied again and saw that the black fire on his body had started to burn again. The lower part of his body had already reached his lower abdomen, and only half of his head and chest were still on fire. Half-Bodied couldn't make any sound at this moment, but he still had a breath left in him. This was due to the fact that his Xian Qi was very strong, and his meridians were very long. Half-Bodied must be suffering from a hellish torment from the twitching of his body. Half-Bodied had finally died. Not even a speck of his ashes remained. Half-Bodied didn't even have the opportunity to turn into smoke under the tyrannical burning of the flame of primal chaos. He had simply vanished into thin air. This superior supreme level expert hadn't even had the time to display his signature skill. He had died in such a muddle-headed manner. Half-Bodied had only waved his sleeves from the beginning to the end. The other party hadn't even moved his hand. But the fire had inexplicably started to rise from the ground, and he had been burned alive. Up until the moment of his death, his mind was still clear as he endured the immense pain. He could clearly feel his body being burned and slowly disappearing. This great fear and despair, his comrades all around him, but none of them could help him. They could only watch helplessly as he slowly turned into ashes. The 3 balls of black fire didn't look like much. However, they were terrifying and could burn anything. They had burned Half-Body's body and Ning Wuching's sword. Then, they continued to burn on the ground. The black-robed man stretched out his hand, and the black fire soared into the sky. Then, it fell into his hand and disappeared. There was only a blank space left on the ground. There were no skeletons or sword remnants left behind. Everyone stared blankly in silence as they gazed at the dazzling emptiness, and they seemed like a group of clay sculptures. After a long moment of silence, Zi Jinghong let out a long sigh of relief. Suddenly, he realized that there was an itch on his forehead, and he did not know why. He reached out his hand to rub it, and only then did he realize that he was already sweating profusely. The cold wind blew, and her back felt cold. It felt as if someone had poured a ladle of cold water on it. Half-bodied strength was roughly on par with hers. In fact, she might have been a little stronger than him. But the disparity between them shouldn't have been too big. However, he had been killed so easily. In fact, she didn't even know how the enemy had attacked. It was said that the onlookers had a clear view of the situation. However, there were so many onlookers, but not a single one of them had been able to figure out how that black-robed man had attacked. What would have happened if he had targeted me? Would I have been spared? The answer is no. This was an obvious matter, so there was no need to analyze or make a judgment. Then, she stole a glance at the other people around her. Everyone's behavior was similar. Their eyes were blank, their bodies were stiff, and beads of sweat were dripping down their faces. Who among these people hadn't run amok in the past? They had been the best of the best in the world. However, they had been frightened to such an extent by that man, even after they had gathered together. This only proved one thing. The strength of that black-robed man was too strange and abnormal. Jinghong, do you have anything else to say? Or do you have something else you want to discuss with me? Jun Moxie clasped his hands behind his back. His cold eyes gazed at Jinghong as he asked in an awe-inspiring manner. The aura of the black-robed man had become very unstable at the same time. It seemed as if it was brimming with manic rage. It seemed as if a hurricane had been set off on the sea. And it seemed as if the waves had reached the sky. Jinghong was taken aback. He knew very well that this powerful black-robed man in front of him was obviously on the verge of exploding. I'm afraid that he'll immediately attack and destroy everyone on my side if I don't give a satisfactory answer. What she didn't know was that Jun Moxie's heart was filled with anxiety. He was barely holding on. Activating the yin-yang escape was not a big deal. But once he used the flame of primal chaos, it was extremely difficult. Furthermore, Jun Moxie could clearly feel that the energy of the Hongjun Pagoda was becoming more and more restless as time passed. It seemed as if he was losing control of it. This fusion process had taken too long. His own mental strength was gradually losing control of the energy of the Hongjun Pagoda. It could break through the control of his mental strength at any time. At that time, he would really be helpless since Senior is given the order, "We will retreat immediately." However, regarding the matter of the divine pill, I hope that Senior can reconsider. After all, the war for seizing the heavens is not a matter of a single family. It concerns the future of the entire Xian continent. Jinghong bowed respectfully. I have my own plans for this matter. When the time is right, I will make a trip to the 3 Holy Lands. I will certainly go to the 3 Holy Lands, Jun Moxie replied in a slow and deep voice. However, he was clenching his teeth in his heart. I'm not going to give you the divine pill. I'm going to vent my anger. I'm going to kill people. They dared to bully my Jun family. How can I live with my conscience if I don't take revenge? How can I face the great hospitality of the 3 Holy Lands? Many thanks for your permission, Senior. Jinghong was overjoyed. She bowed deeply, but then she hesitantly said, "But I don't know about the time. Forget it. I will personally go to the 3 Holy Lands within 2 years, before the war, for seizing the heavens at the latest. Do you have anything else to say? If there's nothing else, then leave. Don't ever come back to the Jun family again. You won't be able to leave if you do. As for what happens outside, this old man has no interest in taking care of it. That's all I have to say." Jun Moxie felt as if his head was about to split open. In fact, it felt as if his soul was being mercilessly torn apart. In fact, he almost wanted to groan. In fact, Jun Moxie even felt that this pain wasn't any less than the burning pain that Half-Bodied had suffered a moment ago. Then, I request Senior to tell us your name, so we can return with an explanation. Jinghong had already made up her mind to withdraw, so she waved her hand and made a gesture. The 89 people of the 3 Holy Lands gathered together and prepared to withdraw regardless of whether they were injured or not. The people of the Hermitage were grieving and indignant, but They couldn't do anything about it. Half-bodied, couldn't even find a strand of his hair. So, what could he do even if he was grieving and indignant? Revenge? That's a joke. An elephant had trampled an ant to death, and the other ants wanted to take revenge. But the problem was, how could they take revenge? They could only wait for the palace lord to make a decision on this matter. After all, they would only be throwing away a few more lives if they were forced to act now. The great golden city and the illusory ocean of blood were preparing to withdraw. So, Ning Wuching and the others also prepared to withdraw. This old man is called Feng Wuching. I used to have a nickname in those days. It was called Heartless Beheading the Heavens. June Moxie coldly snorted and said, "My old brothers from thousands of years ago would have known this old man's name if they were still alive. So, go back and ask your seniors." Zi Jinghong took a deep breath. She nearly bit her own tongue. She was shocked in her heart. No wonder he has such a heaven-defying method. The man in front of me is a super old monster who has lived for thousands of years. She didn't dare to say anything. Instead, she respectfully bowed. "Senior Feng, I'll take my leave." Senior Feng is always welcome to visit the 3 Holy Lands. June Moxie snorted and didn't reply. He clasped his hands behind his back and turned around to ignore her. However, the aura on his body had become even more violent. It seemed that it had reached the critical point and couldn't be controlled. However, Zi Jinghong and the others misunderstood once again. They thought that this old senior who had lived for more than 1,000 years was extremely dissatisfied with their procrastination. So much so that he might even attack them at any time. Their hearts couldn't help but beat wildly. Zi Jinghong made a prompt decision. She shouted, "Let's go!" 89 people leapt up at the same time. The speed of a supreme master was extremely fast. They flashed past the walls of the June family's residence and disappeared into the boundless snowstorm in the blink of an eye. "They're finally gone. They're finally gone." June Moxie finally heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't hold on any longer. The enormous pressure of the Hongjun Pagoda had reached its limit. June Moxie was as helpless as the monkey sun under the 5 Elements mountain. How could an ordinary person like June Moxie withstand the explosive power of a divine object that didn't belong to the human world? June Moxie had used all his spiritual power to fuse and communicate with the Hongjun Pagoda. However, he had to bear the full pressure of the Hongjun Pagoda. If it wasn't for June Moxie's astonishing tenacity and painstakingly persevering, his soul would have long been destroyed. June Mo Xie's mind relaxed as the strong enemy finally left. He had subconsciously relaxed his mind, which had been tensed up the entire time. An exceptionally berserk aura exploded with a loud bang like an explosion. Chapter 551. As for the weaker members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer teams, as well as the even weaker members of the June family, they simply fell to their knees. They were forced to their knees by this pressure, and some even prostrated themselves on the ground. The unprecedented pressure was accompanied by boundless pain. After the enemy retreated, June Moxie's consciousness frantically attacked. June Moxie could not help but let out a painful groan before disappearing with a swoosh. He did not even have the time to look at the June family's losses. He did not even have the time to look at his grandfather and third uncle's injuries. His entire consciousness had already been shattered, and he was sucked into the Hongjun Pagoda. He had completely disappeared without a trace. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wui had originally thought that they were going to die, and they had already given up all hope. Who would have thought that they would be saved, and the situation would turn around? They forced their injured bodies to go forward and thank him, but they did not expect that their savior would suddenly disappear. Such a strange temper. Both father and son had the same thought. But when they thought that such a powerful person was actually June Moxie's master, they could not help but rejoice. Therefore, the June family would be safe for a long time to come after this incident. Jun Zhantian sighed and looked at the mess in the courtyard. He rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, there were no major casualties. This was truly a blessing from the heavens. He calmly issued an order for people to clean up the courtyard and restore it to its original state. Everyone was to rest. Grandpa June did not say any beautiful words, but his tone was a lot more amiable. All of this could be clearly felt by everyone present tonight. Grandpa June was very clear. Everyone present tonight was the true backbone of the June family. People who could be relied on. These people were his own family from now on. There is no need to express gratitude towards one's own family. However, one must wholeheartedly seek the welfare of one's own family. This was what a family head should do. As for those who did not come, June Tian had already made plans. Once this storm was over, he would expel them all. What was the use of keeping people who could only enjoy and not go through trials and tribulations together? After making the arrangements, June Tian hurriedly instructed Jun Wui, "Hurry up and see how Mo Xie is doing. Why hasn't such a big scene appeared yet?" Jun Wui accepted the order and left. As for Mei Shuyan, she was shocked. Mei Shuyan was the closest to Jun Moxie, and she was also the strongest among the people present. Although the groan Jun Moxie let out before he disappeared was almost inaudible, it was still captured by Mei Shuyan. In a split second, she was shocked. Why would such a powerful man let out such a painful groan? Why did this moaning sound so similar to Jun Moxie's? Could it be that this mysterious master was Jun Moxie himself, just using a mysterious method? But how is this possible? The Qian Sun Serpent Queen staggered over and said, "Oh, which expert has already left?" Mei Shuyan stood there in a daze, pondering over the doubts in her heart. She did not hear Snake King's words at all. Every word that Jun Moxie had said to her echoed in her ears. Jun Moxie's voice echoed in her ears bit by bit. Gradually, she became more and more certain that the groan just now was indeed Jun Moxie's voice. How is he? To be able to kill an expert above the level of a great master with a single move, if one's strength was not sufficient and forcefully used such a ruthless move, one would have to pay a heavy price. This was the convention of using a move that one could not use themselves. Presumably, Jun Moxie was no exception. Jun Moxie had already shocked everyone present, but because I said that I must kill that bastard, he forced himself to make a move. Was it all for me? Was it for him? Was it for me? Was it? It was only now that Mei Shuyan finally realized that she had been in contact with Jun Moxie for so long. Jun Moxie had laughed, scolded, shouted, angrily reprimanded, and had been in almost all kinds of states. But she had never seen him cry or groan. Even when she had used the world cage to imprison him in Tiannan and then abused him wantonly, he had never cried or groaned. Jun Moxie had suffered so much on the way back from Tiannan to Tianxiang. If it had been someone else, they would have been terrified and in pain by now. But Jun Moxie had not. She had hit him once again outside Tianxiang City, but he had not. It seemed as if this man could not feel pain. But now, Mei Shuyan had clearly heard his painful groans a moment ago. An extremely strange emotion had filled her heart in a split second. She was suddenly worried, and felt as if her heart was in pain. She did not open her mouth to speak, but suddenly turned around and flew towards Jun Moxie's courtyard. She needed to confirm it. After all, such a big thing had happened. With Jun Moxie's character, there was no reason for him to not show up. Although Mei Shuyan had hoped that Jun Moxie would find an opportunity to escape, she also knew that Jun Moxie was not that kind of person. He was so indifferent to life and death, and he was so proud and arrogant. How could he be afraid of the enemy and escape alone? If one said that Jun Moxie would escape, Mei Shuyan would be the first to not believe it. But he had not shown up, and that was the first strange thing. If he had gone to look for his master, then with such a backer, it would be even more impossible for him to escape. Now that his master had appeared, even the strongest enemy would not be a threat. Especially now that the enemy had retreated, there was no reason for Jun Moxie not to show up. If he was still in the Jun family, then that would mean that the mysterious black-robed man was not him. But if he could not be found, then that groan, what did it mean? If it was really him, then what price did he have to pay to achieve what he had just done? At Mei Shuyan's level, She already knew that there were many unexplainable things in the world. In fact, even when she was at her peak, if she had not suffered from internal injuries, she also knew that there was a secret technique that allowed her to borrow strength from the heaven and earth. But the price of using this secret technique was too high. Unless it was an unsolvable situation, or if it was a situation of certain death, no one would be stupid enough to use this technique. Could it be that the technique that June Moxie used was this kind of strange technique? Then, he had only just touched the edge of Shun Xian. So how could he withstand the majestic power of the heaven and earth? Even I would have to pay the price with my life, let alone June Moxie, this insignificant Shun Xian? If that was the case, then perhaps that weak groan could be explained. Mei Shuyan's figure was like lightning, and she rushed into June Moxie's small courtyard, and then she searched everywhere. Then she came out again and ran around the entire June family like a lightning bolt. Her spirit sense was everywhere, and she did not miss a single corner. She had even forgotten that her internal organs were still in severe pain, and that blood was still slowly flowing out of the corner of her mouth. She had completely forgotten about it, and only her extremely anxious and tired eyes were still earnestly searching every corner. Finally, Mei Shuyan stopped in front of the door of Elegant Fragrance Hut. Everything in the June family was the same as before, but June Moxie had disappeared. Although he had often disappeared mysteriously before, but Mei Shuyan knew that this time it was different. It was completely different. The snowflakes were still falling at a moderate pace, and this was the weather that Mei Shuyan liked the most in the past. But today, Mei Shuyan, who had just escaped from a great calamity, felt completely gloomy in her heart. Leaning on the pillar, Mei Shuyan felt weak for the first time. Where did he go? She gently closed her eyes, and suddenly a drop of tears slowly seeped out. If I had been a bit stronger during the siege of the top 10 experts, how could I have been injured? How could I be of no help to him now? How could this be? Qian Sun's serpent queen gently walked over and looked at her rather worriedly. Elder sister. Two extremely sharp and ruthless eyes suddenly burst out of Mei Shuyan's eyes. She still stood motionless, but the black hair on her head suddenly fluttered. A good while passed, and Mei Shuyan suddenly turned her head. Her eyes were cold. Where are Tiger King and Bear King? Big brother, we are here. Bear Mountain and Earthcracker's bodies were riddled with wounds. They took a step forward and stood opposite to Mei Shuyan. You too. Why didn't you use the divine weapons that June Moxie had given you? You only knew how to use your fists and feet to kill. Are you stupid? Mei Shuyan reprimanded them in a severe tone. I. Bear Mountain and Earthcracker were tongue-tied. They wanted to say that they didn't have the time, but they didn't dare to say it. Instead, they lowered their heads in shame. In fact, the two Beast Kings hadn't gotten used to the days when they had weapons in their hands. So, they had only remembered to use them after they had been fighting for a while. But the battle had ended by the time they were about to use them. However, this may be a good thing for now. The people of the three holy lands may misjudge your strength. So, you two must immediately return to the Tian Fa forest. You don't need to hesitate to kill anyone who tries to stop you. And remember that those two divine weapons aren't just for show. You must bring those pills back safely, even if your bones are crushed to pieces. Mei Shuyan's voice was like 1,000-year-old Xian ice. Also, inform all the level 9 Xian beasts in the Tian Fa forest that they can't break through the bottleneck within 2 years. Then, I will kill them one by one when I return. What's the point of keeping them if they're so useless? I will deal with all the other Xian beasts that are stuck in the bottleneck, regardless of their level. Even you, Third Crane, and the others won't be an exception. Then, I will gather in the Tian Fa forest and wait for my orders. If he dies, I will make the three holy lands and the millions and millions of creatures of this continent buried together with him. The murderous aura in Mei Shuyan's eyes condensed into a blood-red substance as she spoke the last sentence. Her tone was resolute and decisive. In fact, there was no room for negotiation. Can a gentleman be deceived? Let's see what this enraged gentleman will do to those conspirators. Chapter 552. Big Bear and Earthcracker shrunk their heads as they looked at Mei Shui-yin. Then Big Bear stammered, "Then, boss, are we leaving now?" "Get out of here," Mei Shui-yin snapped. The bodies of the two beast kings shivered. Then they rushed away as if they were fleeing for their lives. In the blink of an eye, the two tall and sturdy silhouettes had disappeared in the snowstorm that filled the sky. Their movement techniques were extremely fast. In fact, they were even faster than when they had fought against the three Holy Lands. Mei Shui-yin was feeling uneasy, but this was the best time. The people of the three Holy Lands were still in the vicinity of Tianxiang. They hadn't gone far. Mei Shui-yin had calculated their thoughts. Bear King and Tiger King would need to recuperate before continuing their journey, since the Jun family's mysterious guest had helped them. So, even if they had planned to intercept them, they would have planned it a few days later. But the two Beast Kings would be thousands of miles away by then. So, it would be too late to intercept them. Therefore, Mei Shui-yin had made a prompt decision. She had ordered Bear Mountain and Earthcracker to return at full speed despite their injuries, because this was the safest time for them, even though they were injured. This was much safer than the dangers they would face after recuperating from their injuries in a few days. Mei Shui-yin stood quietly in the wind and snow as she watched the two Beast Kings leave. She gently stroked the pillar with her hand as she looked at the courtyard with an infatuated look in her eyes. Jun Moxie's words and smiles seemed to appear in her mind. "I wonder, how is he?" "I'm really worried." Qian Sun's Serpent Queen stood quietly on one side with a complicated look in her eyes. A long time passed. Mei Shui-yin sighed softly and said, "Have you found Jun Moxie's whereabouts?" The Qian Sun's Serpent Queen replied, "The Jun family is also doing their best to search for him. Don't worry, eldest sister. Although we can't find him for the time being, he is such a tyrannical master. So he'll be fine." Mei Shui-yin sighed and closed her eyes helplessly. "That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that he's pretending to be his master. But I can't say it out loud." Mei Shui-yin is anxious, but there's nothing she can do. He stood there in a daze for a long time. Finally, he felt agitated and spat out a mouthful of blood. Just when Jun Moxie was finally unable to control it, and the Hongjun Pagoda's Qi field suddenly exploded, the experts of the three Holy Lands who were running away suddenly stopped in their tracks and turned around to look at the storm of Qi from afar. They couldn't help but sweat profusely, and their hearts were filled with joy. So ferocious. Brother Z, it was really dangerous this time. If it wasn't for Brother Z's prompt decision, I'm afraid, the great Golden City's three-pearled throne master, Xiao Wei Quan, flew at high speed with lingering fear in his heart. He moved closer to Zi Jinghong, and the two of them ran side by side as he whispered. It was really dangerous. Zi Jinghong also wiped the cold sweat off her forehead. She turned around to look and gnashed her teeth as she said, "Ning Wuqing and Ma Jiangming, those bastards, went back and said that everything would be settled as long as we dealt with Venerable Mei. But who would have thought that we would encounter such a fiend when we came here in such a majestic manner? Not only did we suffer heavy casualties, but we also suffered a huge defeat. These pockmarks aren't called pockmarks, they're called scams." The third head of the Purple Clan was filled with righteous indignation at this moment. He thought of how he had lowered his head and bowed in front of that mysterious man, and couldn't help but feel angry. That man's astonishing strength would have left all 90 of us behind if it weren't for the sake of the war for seizing the heavens. Let's not talk about anything else. Just think about that black fire. It only touched Half-Bodyed's body a little. And think about that old freak when we were facing Ning Wuqing. That old freak waved his hand and sent out 2 huge waves of black fire. Brother Xiao, this. Zi Jinghong smacked her lips and shook her head. That's right. That black fire alone had the ability to make us stay behind. Once the black fire was fully unleashed, it would burn an entire area in an instant. Furthermore, when he retracted his hand, such a terrifying thing had disappeared so easily and inexplicably. It was truly a godly skill. Brother Z, Xiao Weiqing shivered. However, he didn't know that June Moxie had also wanted to do the same thing. The problem was that June Moxie didn't have the ability to do so at that time. He could have plotted against one or two people, but June Moxie would have been at his wit's end if he had been prepared to put some distance between them. Xiao Weicheng said, "That mysterious senior's black fire is extraordinary. But Brother Z, I don't know if you've noticed, but he suddenly reappeared after he had incinerated half-bodied. I thought that he must have drilled out of the ground. That's the only explanation. But the place where he drilled out didn't seem to be empty at all. In fact, there wasn't even the slightest bit of mysterious energy fluctuation. He came and went like a ghost. He could have drilled into the ground if he couldn't defeat his opponent. That's right. He's an old freak who has lived for more than 1,000 years. So, how can he be a small matter?" Zi Jinghong comforted him. "After all, he's been practicing for more than 1,000 years. What she meant was, how many years have we been practicing compared to that old freak? What's the rush? Brother Z is right." Xiao Weicheng changed his train of thought. Then he calmed down. The information we received was wrong. Our army was exhausted to death. Fortunately, our illusory ocean of blood didn't suffer many losses. Otherwise, wouldn't we have been skinned alive by the sovereign? It's no wonder that Huang Taiyang was vaporized without a sound. He had such a terrifying old freak. So, he would have turned into a black moon even if there were 10 or 8 Huang Taiyang here. Zi Jinghong hatefully spoke up. "Our great golden city didn't suffer many losses either." Xiao Weicheng also heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he gloatingly said, "But Hermitage half-bodied has been set ablaze. This incident must have dealt a heavy blow to Hermitage. Even the great chief has been incinerated." The two of them looked at Hermitage Ning Wuching's gloomy face, and they suddenly felt happy. "I reckon that he won't feel good when he goes back." The information we received was seriously wrong. It had led to the death of the great chief. Even the sword that had accompanied him for many years had turned into molten iron. It would have been strange if the palace lord hadn't cursed Ning Wuching when he returned to Hermitage. But that half-body deserves to die. Listen to his words. Does he have the bearing of a superior great master? Even a hoodlum wouldn't stoop to such a level. This old man looks down on him. Zi Jinghong snorted. Then she said, "This old man felt a faint sense of satisfaction when I saw that old man get incinerated. That's good. Feng Juqing was right. He only had half of his body left. So, there's no point in him living. Brother Z is right. Then, should we change the other plan?" Xiao Weicheng's eyes flickered. "That won't be necessary. Senior Feng has always been the backer of the Jun family. He's a human being after all. He didn't mention anything about the Tian Fa forest. So, we still have to do what we have to do. He didn't say anything about the Tian Fa forest, even if he cares about it. So, we could just push the blame and say that we didn't know about it. So, he won't make things difficult for us for the sake of the war for seizing the heavens. Moreover, what's done can't be undone. So, it'll be useless even if he gets angry. After all, can he fight against the entire strange races by himself? Won't the overall situation depend on us?" Zi Jinghong slowly said. The corners of her mouth revealed a sly smile. She didn't know that Jun Moxie had wanted to say something at that time. But he was in so much pain that he couldn't say anything. Let's leave Tian Xiang in that case. Then, let's concentrate on Tian Fa. We can kill the Tiger King and the Bear King first. Xiao Weicheng clenched his fist fiercely. The Tiger King and the Bear King have suffered serious injuries today, so they should be able to rest for a few days with such strong reinforcements. So we can set up our trap. Unlike the Venerable Mei and the Snake King, they don't have divine weapons. So I believe it'll be easier to kill them. Zi Jinghong's eyes flashed. All right. Didn't Jun Moxie always say that he wants to go to the Dongfang family? The Venerable Mei is in love with them. I'm afraid he'll follow them. That'll be our best chance. But we must be careful not to touch Jun Moxie. We must keep him alive. Maybe we can negotiate with the Black-Robe Man. Also, we must increase our surveillance on the Jun family. If necessary, we can capture some of the Jun family members. Xiao Weiqing couldn't help but interrupt. Are you courting death? Zi Jinghong looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. That Feng Juqing is obviously staying with the Jun family. You must know that refining pills is always done in a fixed place. And the aristocratic hall of the Jun family has been auctioning those miraculous pills. The quantity is frightening. So, it's obvious that they were refined by that old monster. This also means that the old monster has always been with the Jun family. He has never left. Kidnap the Jun family's people? You're the great Golden City's 3 Pearls King. But you came up with such a suicidal idea. Xiao Weiqing's forehead started to sweat. He realized that he couldn't touch the Jun family. Actually, we might as well send people to mobilize a large sum of money. Moreover, we also need to gather all the elixirs we've collected over the years. That old freak's methods are brilliant, and he has supernatural powers. But he's still very concerned about the battle for seizing the heavens. So, we just need to follow the rules of the aristocratic hall. Or, we need to sincerely ask for help. Then, that old freak might not necessarily reject us. Perhaps, he might even help us refine some pills. Hee. Brother Z is right. I believe that all our problems will be solved as long as we follow that old monster's instructions. Xiao Weiqing agreed. We can't relax about the Beast King either. Immediately send people to monitor the Jun family's road. Report to us if Tiger King and Bear King come out. Then, we'll intercept them once they're 500 kilometers away from Tianxiang. Zi Jinghong resolutely ordered. It'll be a disaster if they break out of the encirclement and return to the Jun family's residence. You're right, Xiao Weiqing pondered and said, but we must also send a few people to the city gate. Or, we must quickly dispatch horses to the Southern Heaven Road. This is to ensure that nothing goes wrong. We must act quickly if that's the case. It was dangerous this time, but fortunately, we didn't suffer any serious injuries. Our strength is still relatively intact, so it won't be a big deal even if some of our people are injured. Zi Jinghong smiled mischievously. Hermitage's people are like a group of dragons without a leader, but we can still reorganize them. After all, their strength isn't small. Xiao Weiqing understood her meaning and smiled. Chapter 553. As for Jun Moxie, his mind relaxed, and he immediately suffered a strong backlash. His consciousness became muddled, and he was instantly sucked into the Hongjun Pagoda. He felt as if he'd been fried in a wok of oil 500 times, and then his tongue was pulled out and his heart was gouged out 10,000 times. Jun Moxie completely lost consciousness the moment he was sucked into the Hongjun Pagoda. Jun Mo, Xie's face, body, and the 7 apertures of his head started to ooze blood as he fainted. The black robe that was covering his body started to swell up in a strange manner. Then, it suddenly exploded into pieces with a loud bang. Even the outermost robe was torn apart due to the extreme expansion. How could the rest of his clothes be spared? So, Jun Daxiao once again put on a limited version of nakedness. The extremely thick white fog was like a solid substance, and it carried traces of blood as it spurted out from all over Jun Moxie's naked body like a fountain. It only stopped after a long time. His blood-soaked body was still twitching in pain, twitching and twisting. It seemed as if the tendons of his entire body were also moving incessantly. The borrowed strength this time was really too much. It far exceeded the limit that Jun Moxie could bear. The damage to the body was naturally unprecedented and unparalleled. At the last moment, if the Hongjun Pagoda hadn't suddenly sucked him in, perhaps Jun Moxie would have already exploded into a mist of blood. After a while, the rich spiritual energy of the Hongjun Pagoda surged into Jun Moxie's body, which was lying on the ground. It madly surged into every part of his body, his 5 senses, and every pore of his body. It madly surged into every nook and cranny of his body. After an unknown period of time, Jun Moxie finally twitched his fingers and slowly opened his eyes. He looked around with difficulty and finally murmured, "Mother of Asterisk her, I didn't die." Good, really good. It seemed that Jun Dashao also knew that he was going to die this time. This time, he had really gone too far. As soon as he came back to his senses, he immediately felt a splitting headache, as if there was a mischievous monkey jumping back and forth in his brain. The veins on both sides of his temples were twitching crazily, as if he was skipping rope. Every joint in his body felt as if there were 10,000 steel needles piercing him. The most terrible thing was that even his little brother was swaying back and forth in pain. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and cursed, "Damn it, it's none of your business. You're not needed in this kind of battle. Why are you making a fuss? Are you trying to show off your sturdiness?" Just as he finished cursing, he was quickly drowned by the pain. Since there was no one here to hear him, Jun Dashao simply could not bear it anymore. He screamed at the top of his lungs, as if 10,000 pigs were being slaughtered at the same time. His aura was earth-shattering. Mother asterisk her, why is it so painful? It's really F asterisk king challenging my limits. Jun Moxie's mouth was the strengthened version of the 3-character sutra. He had gone over all the curses he could say from his previous life to this life, and even more than once. But he still felt the pain, so he cursed again in different dialects. From the various deities to the netherworld, from the Buddha to Thagata to the Earth Lord, they were all cursed. Then, it was the people from the 3 holy lands who were cursed, starting from the previous generation, then going back generation by generation, all the way to the 72 generations of ancestors. All the female direct relatives were cursed. Not a single one was spared. Jun Dashao furrowed his brows, and his eyes widened as he cursed the heavens and the earth. He was in high spirits, and his tongue became smoother and smoother. The more he cursed, the more skillful he became. His saliva flew everywhere. If a cursing competition could be held in his current state, Jun Moxie would definitely be the champion, and it would be an overwhelming victory. No one would have any objections, and no one would be dissatisfied. It was enough to curse those dead people until their bones danced disco in their coffins until they died of exhaustion. While his mouth was moving nonstop, the Hongjun Pagoda spiritual energy did not stop healing him just because his tongue was too poisonous. It was still doing its duty until suddenly, why doesn't it hurt anymore? Jun Moxie finally stopped cursing because he realized that his body did not hurt anymore. Could it be that cursing was actually a wonderful healing method? Wahaha! In the past, Guan Yu could play Go without batting an eyelid. Today, there's Jun Dashao's torrential cursing to resist the 18 levels of torture in hell. Looks like I, this young master, should also become an immortal legend. Jun Moxie was somewhat pleased with himself. It was a pity that this could not be spread out. Otherwise, the customs of this world would definitely change because of this, with Jun Dashao's combination of thousands of years of cursing, national cursing, and world cursing, if it were to be turned into actual words and spread out. This would be an earth-shattering change to the human society of the Xian continent. At the very least, it would be able to change the monotonous concept of people's cursing and form a diverse system of cursing. And this generation's super grandmaster was none other than Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao. Although it was indeed not painful anymore, his entire body still did not have the slightest bit of strength. He was still lying on the ground and did not even have the strength to sit up. In fact, he did not even have the strength to move a little. Jun Moxie was very scared. He naturally knew how dangerous it was for him this time. Although he was scared, if he had to choose again, he would still do the same. He would absolutely not regret it. Even if his soul really flew away and his body died, so what? Because the people here were his family, and they were the people he cared about the most in this life. As long as I, Jun Moxie, still have a single breath left in me, not to mention the 3 holy lands, even the gods in the heavens will not be able to harm them. At least, before stepping over my dead body, no one will be able to. Jun Moxie gritted his teeth and slowly circulated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune in his body. Only when he raised his chi did he realize that his dantian was actually empty. There was not even a drop of inner energy left. It was truly deserted. With great effort, He opened his inner vision and used his divine sense to examine his empty dantian. It was like a dry and cracked earth, barren and desolate. Really awesome. Not even a little bit was left for me. This is really playing with me to death. At least leave some for me to nourish myself. Jun Moxie swallowed a mouthful of saliva, closed his eyes, and began to circulate his chi to recover. But he did not know that if he had not practiced alchemy like crazy, he would not even have been able to fuse and borrow the energy this time. Gradually, at an extremely slow speed, strands of energy were drawn out from his severely damaged meridians like gossamer threads and slowly gathered in his completely dried-up dantian. Then, Jun Moxie carefully controlled this strand of spiritual energy and carefully circulated it in his body for one cycle. After one cycle, his spirit inexplicably rose. Then, he began the second cycle, and when he reached the ninth cycle, there was a sudden boom sound. Everywhere in his body, his meridians, muscles, tendons, bones, the purest energy was released and added to the spiritual energy. The chi flow in his meridians became stronger and stronger, and after each cycle, it became thicker than the previous cycle. At the same time, the heaven and earth spiritual chi outside his body began to emit a shio-shio sound, and like a tidal wave, it crazily poured into his body, quickly transforming into energy and then returning to his dantian. After one cycle, it completely transformed into the purest spiritual energy. At this moment, intentionally or unintentionally, Jun Moxie had entered into a transcendent state where he forgot about himself and everything else. He only knew that he was blindly circulating and crazily demanding. As the chi flow and his meridians continued to strengthen, his body's absorption of the Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual chi also became faster and faster. The rich and boundless heaven and earth spiritual chi was produced inside the Hongjun Pagoda, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, it turned into a milky white chi flow and drilled into Jun Moxie's pores. What kind of existence was the Hongjun Pagoda? No matter how much Jun Moxie demanded, it would always be able to supply it, and it seemed to be very easy. Jun Moxie's dantian had been completely dried up after his narrow escape from death. His dantian had become completely empty, and it had become completely clean and smooth. This had given rise to a sense of dread in the heart of the daring Jun Moxie. Therefore, Jun Moxie tirelessly operated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune again and again. Round after round, he did not notice at all that the chi flow in his meridians was slowly transforming into a third layer of thin silver thread, and then this silver thread continued to grow and strengthen along with the circulation of the Shin technique. The current silver thread had already surpassed the previous state of Jun Moxie, and it was still growing. If Jun Moxie were to open his inner vision, he would definitely find that his meridians were also beginning to expand due to the silver thread. At the same time, on Jun Moxie's forehead, a faint shadow slowly began to appear and gradually became clearer. A colorful and exquisite pagoda-shaped object appeared in front of his forehead, like a small forehead ornament hanging in the air. The pagoda-shaped forehead ornament gradually became clearer and slowly condensed into a real object. It rotated on Jun Moxie's forehead, and every time it rotated, it would emit tens of thousands of rays of light, like a rainbow after the rain, all concentrated here at this moment. Of course, all of this, Jun Moxie was completely unaware. The current him was like a ghost that had starved to death for 300 years, and suddenly saw a pile of steamed buns. He crazily absorbed the heaven and earth spiritual chi, endlessly and never satisfied. Even if he was stuffed to death, he still had to absorb. After an unknown amount of time, the small pagoda-shaped object on his forehead slowly stopped rotating and stopped 3 inches away from Jun Moxie's forehead. He had finally reached his limit. Jun Moxie felt that his absorption of the heaven and earth spiritual chi was becoming slower and slower, as if it had completely stopped growing. At the same time, his entire body was swollen with pain, and his brain felt as if it was suddenly stuffed with a big ball of cotton. bulging so much that it seemed like a hole would be formed if he pressed it. At this moment, the art of unlocking heaven's fortune within his meridians suddenly stopped circulating and became completely motionless. No matter how he urged his internal energy, he was unable to move the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Not even by a little bit. What was going on? June Moxie frowned in puzzlement and was about to use his inner vision to check his current situation, when suddenly, without warning, boom. Chapter 554. June Moxie was indescribably shocked. Suddenly, a similar explosion occurred in his mind. Bang! Blood spurted out from June Moxie's mouth and nose at the same time. His meridians also felt an intense pain, as if they had been shattered into millions of pieces. Could it be that I've become a cripple? Before June Moxie had the time to be pessimistic, he discovered that his meridians were clearly still fine. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he suddenly discovered that a faint golden mist had appeared in his meridians. Then, this faint golden mist became thicker and thicker, and gradually blocked the flow of his meridians. Another boom sound rang out, and June Moxie cried out in dizziness. He hurriedly used his internal energy to look inside his body, and discovered that the faint golden mist that had appeared in his meridians had suddenly dispersed without a trace. Instead, it had been replaced by a thin golden thread. It was like a golden stream of water was joyfully swimming in his meridians. June Moxie could clearly feel that this golden stream of water contained an abnormally large amount of energy. Compared to his previous level, it was completely incomparable. If the original third layer of silver spiritual energy could be said to be able to lift 100 jin, then the current golden thread could lift a small hill. At the very least, it could lift a ton, or even 10 tons. This was simply an earth-shattering and terrifying transformation. Could it be that I've broken through again? This thought had just flashed through June Moxie's mind, and suddenly, there was an earth-shaking turbulence in his mind. He could only feel a PU sound in front of his forehead, as if something had broken. Of course, June Moxie did not know that this clear sound was the sound of the strange pagoda that had been formed by the heaven and earth's spiritual energy on his forehead. It had suddenly exploded into a colorful stream of air and had entered his head through his Bai acupoint. Then, June Moxie felt the entire Hong June pagoda shake and rumble, as if there was an earthquake. He was originally lying on the ground, but now he was thrown up high. Fortunately, his face was facing upwards. If his face was facing downwards, then he would have been intimately in contact with the earth, even though he was inside the Hong June pagoda. F***CKME. Junimo Xie managed to turn around in the midst of the chaos, and managed to avoid falling flat on his face. He muttered in his heart, "What's going on?" Just as he opened his eyes, his gaze suddenly froze, and his mouth fell open, unable to say a word. About 10 zhang in front of him, there was originally an empty pagoda wall, but now it had disappeared, and in its place was a door. A 7-colored door opened wide. The 4th level of the Hong June pagoda, and at that very moment, break through. Holy shit. If I can break through by risking my life once, isn't this forcing me to risk my life more? June Moxie was dumbfounded. Only by risking your life can you break through? It was like that last time, and it's actually the same this time. Is life that fun? Thinking of this, June Moxie could not help but blurt out, "How can I have so many lives to play with? If I do it again, I'll have to end my own life. It's too painful." Although he said that, June Moxie also knew that breaking through is not something that could be achieved by risking his life. After breaking through, even if he risked his life 1,000 times, he might not be able to achieve the next breakthrough so quickly. In this period of time, June Moxie had already built a stable foundation for his breakthrough. From the time that June Moxie broke through to the 3rd level of Tiannan, it was only a little more than 3 months. But this was the slowest breakthrough that he had made since his rebirth. Although the higher the level of Xian cultivation, the slower the breakthrough would be. But although June Moxie's breakthrough was unexpected, it was still within reason, Previously, when he was refining pills, he had unintentionally broken through the Tian Xian level and suddenly advanced to the Shun Xian level. At first, Jun Moxie thought that he had broken through to the 4th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. But after careful investigation, he found out that this was not the case. But from then on, Jun Moxie knew that although he had not yet broken through, he was already on the verge of breaking through at any time. Everything was just a matter of luck. Originally, he thought that the breakthrough would take a period of time. But this time, Jun Moxie was risking his life. It was too dangerous. Jun Moxie was the host of the Hongjun Pagoda. How could the Hongjun Pagoda allow him to play with his life? It must be known that the Hongjun Pagoda was currently residing in Jun Moxie's body. The two of them were already inseparable. Although their abilities could not be transferred easily, they were truly bound together. If Jun Moxie really died, then the Hongjun Pagoda would have no choice but to follow him into reincarnation. So at the most crucial moment, the Hongjun Pagoda finally displayed its divine might. It dragged this fellow back in at the last moment when his soul was about to scatter and helplessly carried out a super repair. But this brat was still not satisfied. Taking advantage of the fact that his meridians were empty, he actually began to risk his life again, risking his life to absorb spiritual energy. And it was done unconsciously. This was even more helpless. Could it be that this fellow was going to self-destruct again, so soon after he was pulled back from the brink of explosion? Fortunately, Jun Daxiao's luck was great. He was not cultivating in the outside world, but directly inside the Hongjun Pagoda. So, when the spiritual energy in his body self-destructed, the Hongjun Pagoda naturally compressed it back. This compression directly led to a qualitative change. Therefore, this breakthrough was both reasonable and unexpected at the same time. It was really a coincidence of opportunity. The right time, the right place, and the right people could not be missing. It was extremely rare. If the Hongjun Pagoda could hear Jun Moxie's words, risking my life once and I can break through. Looks like I have to risk my life more. No matter how strong his foundation was, he would probably spit out a mouthful of blood in grief and indignation. This fellow really doesn't know how to love himself. Other than risking his life, what else can you King play with? Kid, are you playing with your own life? You're simply playing with this pagoda. Which of the previous masters did not treat their own bodies as treasured rafts to cross the world? Treasured incomparably? They were afraid of even the slightest injury. Why is it that after following this fellow, I have to be on tenterhooks every day? I've never seen anyone more willing to risk their life than this fellow. He's not even a silver Xian, and he dares to provoke you Xian. He's just a gold Xian, and he dares to provoke Tian Xian. He's finally climbed to Yu Xian's level with great difficulty, and he dares to challenge Shun Xian as an equal. He even wants to kill Shun Xian. It would be good if he didn't provoke trouble, but if he did, he would defend the Silver Blizzard City in Shuehan Manor. After the trip to Tiannan, he'd finally managed to raise his cultivation to Tian Xian's level. His actions had once again escalated, and he had directly started to fight against the great masters. Let's not talk about the past for now. Just a few days ago, he had just risen to the Spirit Xian realm, and the most awesome operation in history had begun. He had directly challenged 30 people above the Supreme level, and 60 of them were at the Supreme level. That was a total of 90 peak experts. Such a large group of people had come to kill him. If the Hongjun Pagoda could sweat under such a situation, it would probably shudder at Jun Moxie's boldness. Sweat, big sweat, waterfall sweat, Genghis Khan. Along the way, he'd been challenging those at higher levels. Moreover, he hadn't only skipped 1 or 2 levels, but had directly skipped 4, 5, 7, and 8 levels. It was basically no different from challenging those at higher levels. This fellow really doesn't know life from death. This was a good comparison. A person who just started cultivating and hadn't even built a good foundation was provoking powerful people at the spirit severing stage, void opening stage, ascension stage, and great ascension stage every day. This was simply putting one's head on one's belt every day, as if one's life didn't belong to oneself, but to some bitter enemy. Even if this mother of asterisk her intended to frame me, it can't be so accurate every time. If it wasn't for my help, you would have already reincarnated dozens of times by now. And now you're saying, as long as you play with your life, you can break through. If I could move, I would have spat on your face immediately. It's not that I haven't seen shameless people, but it's rare to see someone as shameless as you. How would Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao know about this? He happily strode forward, sighing that he'd gained a blessing in disguise. He shook his head and shook his buttocks as he entered the 4th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. This posture was like a poor farmer carrying a big bag into the country's treasury. The expression on his face was, "I'm going to be rich." In fact, that was the case. With such intense excitement, Jun Dashao had completely forgotten that he was still naked. This caused his current posture to be a little comical. He was swaying in front, twisting and turning at the back, and his face had an extremely infuriating expression. It was really too despicable. Actually, even if he really remembered, the current Jun Dashao might not care much about it. After all, he was the only one here. Besides, with Jun Dashao's super thick skin, even if there was really someone else, he would still sway like this. It's just a stinky skin. Dashao snorted. This guy was a typical case of forgetting the pain once the scar healed. He had just recovered and broken through, but he immediately threw the previous dangerous situation to the back of his mind. His eyes shone with a greedy golden light, and his face was filled with the most lascivious smile. He raised his long spear and walked in proudly. Once he entered, Jun Moxie felt that something was different. This place seemed to be very different from the previous 3 levels. The entire 4th level was a chaotic world. Spiritual qi filled the air, and it was as if it was a solid substance. Some of it even hit Jun Moxie's body. Jun Dashao could even feel the force of the impact. How pure must the spiritual qi be to be able to create such a scene in front of him? And that was not all. There were also red flames, green water, and black floating in the air. In short, there were many messy things. Jun Mo Xie was startled. He hadn't expected to see such a situation on the 4th floor. He didn't even have time to think about it. Suddenly, a rainbow light flashed in front of him, and a few inexplicable chants appeared in his mind. Chapter 555. Jun Moxie only felt a stabbing pain in his mind, and his consciousness became blurry. In a daze, he suddenly understood that the 4th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had already entered his mind. This wasn't rare. After all, the first few levels of the mantra were also learned in this way. But in the next moment, Jun Dashao's naked body seemed to have become a bottomless pit in an instant, and suddenly emitted a terrifying and irresistible suction force. All the unstable elements in the 4th level, without exception, abruptly became orderly at this moment. Starting with the green energy, it rapidly drilled into Jun Dashao's body, then red, then black. At the same time, it absorbed the violent and almost tangible pure spiritual energy. Jun Mo Xie could clearly feel that his meridians were like a boundless ocean, crazily absorbing all kinds of energy and spiritual qi. These energies disappeared as soon as they entered his body. Only the spiritual qi was getting thicker and thicker and was crazily rushing into his body. In fact, it was like an avalanche, and 100 rivers were converging into one another. With the meridians in his body filled up, they naturally and rapidly strengthened. His dantian also seemed to be propped up by the rapidly expanding golden current. Slowly, the golden spiritual energy in Jun Moxie's body once again filled his dantian, and this time it was no longer a gas, but a substance, an abnormally solid substance. After an unknown amount of time had passed, finally, the moment the spiritual energy in his meridians stopped circulating, the surging spiritual energy in the 4th level had actually been completely absorbed. New spiritual energy rushed in crazily, slowly filling up the 4th level, but it was already calm. But Jun Moxie's body could no longer absorb it on its own. Even if he deliberately circulated his qi to absorb it, there would be no effect. This was because his body was already completely saturated in silence. June Moxie's full dantian suddenly began to slowly rotate. This time it was compressed, extremely compressed. The condensed golden spiritual energy became smaller and smaller, and a large amount of spiritual energy in his meridians was once again sucked in bit by bit, accelerating the compression in his dantian. Finally, the golden spiritual energy gradually condensed into a golden bead the size of a baby's fist. It was still rotating at a terrifying speed, crazily absorbing spiritual energy. Suddenly, at the moment when it was rotating at its fastest speed, it unexpectedly stopped without warning. Immediately after, June Moxie felt his whole body tighten, and an indescribable strange feeling suddenly emerged. On the top of his head, an extremely cool and clear stream of spiritual energy flowed down from the Baihui acupoint, all the way down along the Ren meridian like a hot knife through butter, all the way to the feet, and a warm stream of energy rushed up the Yongquan acupoint on the soles of the feet, going against the governing meridian upwards, all the way to the Baihui acupoint. His body shook violently, and the two streams of spiritual energy, one cold and one hot, suddenly collided at the intersection of the governing and conception meridians. June Moxie let out a miserable groan and felt as if a mysterious door had been opened inside his body. The two streams of energy, one cold and one hot, quickly blended together, and in a split second, there was no distinction between them. His whole body instantly felt warm, and it was actually very pleasing. At the same time, the golden bead that had just condensed into a solid substance in his dantian suddenly shattered without a sound. June Moxie focused on his internal vision and couldn't help but be shocked. What is this thing? In June Moxie's dantian, a baby the size of a baby's fist suddenly appeared. It was pink all over, with 4 limbs and facial features, eyebrows, eyes, and pink and tender. It was very pleasing, and it was sitting upright with its eyes closed. It seemed to even be breathing. Damn, I'm actually pregnant. June Moxie cried in surprise, and only felt that all the hair on his body stood up. Pregnancy without sex. Cake seller. The second Jesus is about to be born. This idiot cultivator, he actually thought that a cultivator's nascent soul was pregnant. Once again, his IQ really had no lower limit. At this moment, June Moxie felt an inexplicable flash of golden light in front of him, and he didn't know why. But there was another large piece of densely packed text. June Moxie was overjoyed. It seemed that the harvest this time was really not small. He calmed himself down and finished reading in one breath, and couldn't help but become darker and darker. In the end, he couldn't help but scold. Damn, you could have just said 4 words. This is immortal cultivation, and that would have been it. You actually wrote tens of thousands of words. Do you think I'm an idiot? Little did he know, if not for this text, he would really be more of an idiot than an idiot. It seemed that this extra harvest was probably because the Hongjun Pagoda really couldn't stand it anymore, and simply gave him an enlightenment in immortal cultivation as a pity for Shao Bai. Well, it really wasn't much different from a children's book. Other than an introduction, it's just an introduction. Why isn't there anything more practical? Jun Dashao muttered and complained. Just teach me how to destroy the world. It'd be best if it's the legendary electric eye technique. If I see a pretty girl with a good temperament, I'll just stare at her, and then that girl will pester me and fall in love with me, and won't marry anyone but me. How cool would that be? Jun Dashao's fantasies reached the end, and he started laughing lewdly to himself. After a round of fantasies, Jun Dashao officially began to check the specific harvest this time. Yes, it was really abundant. The power of water, fire, and earth. At the same time, a rather short and concise incantation appeared in his mind. Metal and wood are the foundation. Water and fire are the same source. Thick earth is the virtue. It is the 5 elements. The power of the 5 elements overturns heaven and earth, and in the end, returns to chaos. After taking a look, Jun Moxie seemed to understand, but he didn't. However, there was one thing that Jun Moxie seemed to understand very clearly. This time, he's rich. He's really rich. He had been in contact with the power of the 5 elements since the 3rd level, and he finally gathered all of them here. All of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. If these powers of water and fire were as strong as the power of metal, it would be hard for him not to use them. If any trash from the 3 holy lands dared to say anything, he would directly break their legs. After carefully sensing the specific power in his body, Jun Moxie clearly felt that there was an obvious difference. The current him, according to the classification of the strength of a profound practitioner, was no longer an ordinary Shunshin strength. After breaking through, he had actually achieved the strength of a supreme martial artist, and it had directly surpassed the 5th level of Shunshin. This was the so-called 1st level of the supreme martial artist realm. But as for which stage he had reached, after all, there was no comparison, so Jun Moxie also had no clue. But now, Jun Moxie started to have a headache about another matter, because now he finally knew that what he was cultivating was the purest and most superior cultivation method. Then, it was almost certain that he would be immortal in the future. Cough cough, this fellow's only impression of cultivation was that it was limited to immortality. Then, if that was really the case, what would happen to his family? He couldn't possibly wait for tens or hundreds of years, when all his family members had died one by one, and the peerless beauties had all turned into skeletons, leaving him alone to live forever. F***CK. Was that cultivation or torture? Parting in life and death, just 1.5 people was already unbearable, not to mention being the only one left in the end. Could it be that he had to go through a cycle of parting in life and death? His ancestors lived for 800 years, and his descendants had dozens of generations. Their bloodlines came from the same source, and they met each other but didn't know each other. That wouldn't do. He had to change the situation that was very likely to happen. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes, seriously considering this matter. This matter was really not a small matter, and he definitely couldn't make a rash decision. But what should he do? Jun Daxiao was naked, and he was in a daze inside the Hongjun Pagoda, thinking of a solution. Meanwhile, the outside world was in chaos because of him, because Jun Moxie had gone missing for 3 days and 3 nights. This missing period of time was a little too long, especially after the previous major incident, causing people to be even more anxious. In the end, even Jun Wui, who had always been full of confidence in Jun Moxie, was extremely anxious. Although Grandpa Jun looked calm on the surface, his heart was already burning with anxiety. His only grandson's whereabouts were unknown. What should he do? Could it be that he had been captured by the people from the 3 holy lands? Mei Shuiyin had only meditated for 1 night, and her injuries had yet to fully recover. She had already gone out to look for Jun Moxie's whereabouts. Although she was 80% sure that Jun Moxie must have suffered a huge backlash and was currently hiding somewhere to recuperate, or perhaps he had already been turned into ashes. But she still held onto that one last hope and found the gathering place of the 3 holy lands and closely monitored them. She only hoped that she would be able to find traces of Jun Moxie here. Although the results were not good, at least he was still alive. With her peerless Qigong, she naturally did not have to worry about being discovered. As the days passed, Mei Shuiyin's heart grew more and more desperate. That tyrannical and almost explosive emotion became more and more uncontrollable, and the desire to kill in her heart grew more and more intense. Right now, even when she looked at the ordinary citizens of Tianxiang City, her eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. This was a crazy thought that could not wait to destroy the entire world. All this while, Mei Shuiyin had always regarded the war for seizing the heavens as her responsibility. She had concentrated on her cultivation, waiting for the completion of her mission. Even if the battlefield was dyed with blood, she felt that she had no regrets. In fact, it was a kind of glory, the greatest glory of the Tian Fa forest that had been passed down since ancient times. In her heart, there had never been any other thoughts. As for the love affair between a man and a woman, she had always treated it as a joke or even a myth. Mei Shuiyan had never believed that there was anyone in this world who could move her heart. Mei Shuiyan was an extremely stubborn person. This could be seen from the fact that even when she was being hunted and framed, she still persisted in her beliefs. At the same time, she was also a proud woman who thought highly of herself. Chapter 556. Even though no one has seen my elegant demeanor. That's only natural, it's how it should be. How can ordinary people be worthy of seeing my peerless figure? If they see it, it will be blasphemy to me. Even great Master Shinxian is just a person who fights for power and profit. He's just a petty thief. I, Mei Shuiyan, am such a person. How can I be associated with such a person? The plum blossoms in the snow proudly hold the mist. How many times do I move unhindered in the world? The heroes of the ages are all like this. Walking alone, carefree and unrestrained. She's like the bright moon in the ninth heaven. She's peerless and virtuous. Even the stars in the sky will feel ashamed of their inferiority when she appears. Not a single star dares to appear next to her. She indifferently looks at the vicissitudes of life. She indifferently performs her duty. She's been as calm as still water for many years. She's never been angry. Even when she was seriously injured and being chased, Mei Shuiyan was able to deal with it with indifference. However, Jun Dashao had broken the tranquility of this proud and aloof woman. Moreover, he'd broken her tranquility in such a barbaric way. He'd used such an obscene and vile method to wantonly desecrate Mei Shuiyan's pure and clean body. Although she was in the body of a small Xian beast at that time, Mei Shuiyan still felt an intense anger and a great humiliation. A great humiliation. It was that time in the Tian Fa forest. Jun Moxie hadn't even known about it. He'd successfully provoked all kinds of emotions in Mei Shuiyan's heart. Shame. She was so ashamed that she couldn't show her face. Anger. A majestic anger that seemed to burn everything in its path. Hatred. A hatred that gnashed her teeth. But there was nothing she could do. Mei Shuiyan didn't know how to deal with Jun Moxie. No matter how angry or hateful she was, Jun Moxie had healed her meridians. It could be said that he'd done her a great favor. Moreover, Jun Moxie was obviously related to the mysterious person who had stolen the sacred fruit from him. However, the sacred fruit of Tian Fa was related to the future of the entire Tian Fa forest. So, Mei Shuiyan had a new emotion, frustration. What should I do? Just let go like that? Unreconciled. How could he be reconciled? But kill? No. Cripple? No. Driven by this jealous and contradictory mentality, she followed Jun Moxie all the way to Tianxiang. The two of them met several times. Just when Mei Shuiyan thought that she had successfully let go of this matter and was planning to let go of Jun Moxie offended her again. Furthermore, he had offended her in a hostile situation. Most importantly, that was when she appeared in her human form. This enemy, he actually kissed me and then spanked but this lecher, this made Mei Shuiyan's heart palpitate even more. The contradictory feeling in her heart was getting more and more intense. The worries in her heart were also getting heavier and heavier. Later, when she arrived at the Jun family, she saw Jun Mo Xie working hard without showing his face for several days just to fulfill her request. Regardless of how those divine pills were refined, there was one thing she was sure of. If it wasn't for Jun Mo Xie, those divine pills definitely wouldn't exist. Jun Moxie was the key to everything. But what kind of person was Jun Moxie? Mei Shuiyan obviously understood this point. Not only did she understand it, but she also understood it very well. He was definitely an evil person and definitely not a so-called gentleman. To put it bluntly, the war for seizing the heavens that she cared about the most was not even worth a fart in Jun Mo Xie's heart. The common people of the world had never been his object of consideration. He was by no means a noble person, but he was a true and pure person. He was not the least bit hypocritical. He did what he wanted. He believed that his fate was not up to the heavens. No amount of gold could buy his will. He could destroy an evil organization for a girl he didn't know. He could also stand up for the people he cared about. He didn't hesitate to make the whole world his enemy. He could use the most bloody and cruel methods to eliminate a group of people with high prestige. He didn't care about their good or bad deeds or their past achievements. In this world, other than his own family, Jun Moxie didn't care about anyone. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't an ambitious person. He wasn't a gentleman, because he was a lowly person who acted on his own will. Jun Moxie only cared about his own identity. He was a member of the Jun family. He was Jun Zhan Tian's grandson, Jun Wui's nephew, Dugu Xiaoyi's lover, Guan Qinghan's man, Tang Yuan's brother, and the pillar of the Jun family. Jun Moxie. This was Jun Moxie's identity. He didn't recognize himself as a citizen of the Tian-Xiang Empire. He didn't even see himself as a member of the world. I'm just me. I'm independent. I'm just me. I won't change for anyone or anything. I'll be cool when I want to. I'll be a rogue when I want to. I'll act tough when I want to. I'll pick up girls when I want to. I'll draw my sword when I want to kill. I'll curse when I want to. The world called him a debauchee, but this was a real person, a person who indulged in his desires. He didn't care about the world's opinions. He looked at the world's slander with cold eyes. He didn't care about the future's evaluation. Go F***ck yourself. All of you get lost. Following his heart's desire, doing as he pleased. That was Jun Moxie. Why would such a person be so generous if he didn't have a special reason? Divine pills came one after another. Divine weapons were given without blinking. If he couldn't move his heart, who would be able to get a little benefit from Jun Moxie? So, as Jun Moxie gave more and more, Mei Shuiyan's heart softened. She didn't do it for pills or divine weapons. She did it for Jun Moxie's red eyes every time he came. He couldn't hide his tiredness. It was all for him, for the moment he arrived. But Jun Moxie had never mentioned it. Every time he came, he would always make her laugh and make her happy. Even if she was embarrassed and embarrassed by him, she would still feel a heartfelt warmth in her heart. Because Mei Shuiyan's heart could clearly feel that Jun Moxie didn't want her to worry about him. He didn't want her to worry about him. He didn't want her to worry about him. He only wanted to bear all the pain alone. Then he would swallow it alone. He would chew it slowly and digest it. Then he would face everyone in the world with a cynical look. Even though her strength was countless times stronger than his, he was still willing to shoulder the storm for her, to lift up the cloudy sky, and to hold up a clear sky for her. He made her face the decline of the Tian Fa forest and the oppression of the three holy lands. Suddenly, her heart was filled with hope for tomorrow. During this period of time, Mei Shuiyan had unknowingly gotten used to such happy days. Even though Jun Moxie was much weaker than her, he gave her a strong feeling. As long as he was here, she didn't need to worry about anything. She only needed to wait. Then, everything would be ready. Everything would be fine. Unknowingly, as they interacted with each other, even Mei Shuiyan didn't know that Jun Moxie, this young man, had become the only person she could rely on in this life. As the days passed, Mei Shuiyan had gotten used to Jun Moxie's existence. She was used to having Jun Moxie make the decisions. She was used to showing her rare, girly side in front of him. She was used to his teasing, his cynicism, his voice, and aura. She was even more used to him as a person. At that time, Jun Moxie was always hanging around her. Mei Shuiyan didn't realize what was going on until now. Jun Moxie had disappeared. She had personally seen him disappear without a trace. At this time, Mei Shuiyan finally felt a heart-wrenching pain in her heart. This feeling came so suddenly, and it hurt so much at that moment when she heard that tiny moan. Mei Shuiyan felt as if her heart had been hammered by a 10,000-pound hammer. Looking at the sudden explosion on Jun Moxie's body, Mei Shuiyan felt as if all her internal organs were on fire. It was all for me. It was all for me. Mei Shuiyan finally shed tears for the first time in her life. For the first time in her life, she could clearly feel the saltiness of her tears. The feeling of her heart being broken was overwhelming guilt, self-blame, desperation and despair flooded Mei Shuiyan's consciousness like a tide. If I didn't come to the Jun family, if I didn't force him to refine pills, if I didn't show off in the aristocratic hall, if I didn't expose my identity, why would the three holy lands send such a strong force? 30 superior great masters, 60 great masters, a total of 90 peak experts. What kind of lineup is this? Moreover, the purpose of their arrival was very clear. They had come to deal with Tian Fa's people. But he had appeared the moment I couldn't hold on any longer, and he had saved me. He wouldn't have forced himself to kill a superior great master if I hadn't vowed to kill Half-Bodied. He had risked his life to fulfill my vow. Half-Bodied was finished, but he had also disappeared. Jun Moxie had disappeared, and Mei Shuyan had finally understood her own heart. But it was too late. Was it too late? Was it really too late? Mei Shuyan cried for half the night that very night, which was a rare occurrence. She shed tears in silence, and her heart was broken in silence. She suddenly felt that there was no longer that familiar aura, that comforting warmth, that glib-tongued teasing, that frivolous appearance, and the most important thing was that she had lost that heartfelt sense of security. She had lost that silent expectation. She had lost that bashful hope. She had lost everything. The world had lost its splendor. Mei Shuyan suddenly realized that she couldn't live without this man. The entire world would become lifeless without him. It wouldn't have any interest in living. The three holy lands are nothing in comparison to him. The war for seizing the heavens is nothing in comparison to him. Even the common people of the world and the future of the continent are nothing in comparison. What does all of this have to do with me? Chapter 557. The fourth update. The title was wrong. It should have been 175, but it was written 174, depressing. If he dies, even if I become #1 in the world, what can I do? Even if I win the war for seizing the heavens, what can I do? There's so many people who should have died in this world. Why can't he live? On what basis? Those who should have died didn't die. Those who shouldn't have disappeared disappeared. Those who are still alive, are you all worthy? On what basis do you want me, Mei Shuyan, to fight for you? To fight for you? And then you plot against me behind my back? To hurt me again and again? The people I care about are all gone. Why should I care about you all? Who will care about us? Three holy lands. You are so vicious, so merciless. I, Mei Shuyan, swear that I will destroy you all. I will take revenge for this, even if all the Xian beasts in the entire Tian Fa forest are wiped out. For all eternity, I will not rest until I die. 3 days had passed, and Mei Shuyan had fallen into despair. In these 3 days of observation, from the conversations of the three holy lands, it was clear that they had no intention of capturing Jun Moxie. In fact, they didn't even have any intention of doing so. Then, it was easy to explain that the person who exploded in the courtyard was Jun Moxie. Such a strong explosion. Even if Mei Shuyan was at her peak, she would not have been able to survive. If it was Jun Moxie's small body, there was no need to even think about it. Mei Shuyan returned to the elegant fragrance courtyard in the evening. Her face was cold, and her entire body was emitting a murderous aura. In fact, she had a tyrannical and awe-inspiring mood. In fact, she looked like a demon walking over from afar. The Snake King stretched her head out and then shrank back in fear. Mei Shuyan had already made up her mind. If there was still no news tonight, then tomorrow morning, she and Xiansun Serpent Queen would return to the Tian Fa forest. Then, in the shortest time possible, she would unite all the Xian beasts from Tiannan to Hai Bei, and then launch an all-out attack on the three holy lands. A relentless attack. Although the three holy lands were strong and had a deep foundation, they did not have a lot of people. A few thousand people would be enough. But there were billions of Xian beasts in the world. Even if Mei Shuyan did not use high-level Xian beasts and only used low-level Xian beasts, she would be able to flatten the three holy lands. For example, low-grade beehives, snake hordes, ant hordes, wolf hordes. Just these alone, Every swarm had a terrifying number of billions of them. Such things could be found anywhere in the world, and they could even be found locally. It would definitely be enough to give the three holy lands a hard time. Not to mention the monkeys, tigers, bears, apes, lions, and other large animals. Not to mention the cranes, eagles, and condors in the air. Based on the current situation, the three holy lands were much stronger than the Tianfa forest, but in terms of numbers and strength, they were not on the same level. Mei Shuyan did not have the confidence to defeat the three holy lands with her own strength, but she had the confidence to destroy the three holy lands. That was the reason. And this was also the main reason why the three holy lands had to get rid of the Tianfa forest. Mei Shuyan slowly arrived at the entrance of the elegant fragrance hut and walked in lightly. It was an unusually familiar place, an unusually familiar facility, and an unusually familiar smell. Mei Shuyan stood in the courtyard in a daze and felt that her mind had suddenly gone blank. She was actually so afraid to return to this courtyard, because this courtyard had his scent, the scent that broke her heart, the scent that she could not bear to look back. But she longed to return to this courtyard so much at the same time, because this courtyard had his unique scent. It made her linger back and forth. Yearning for it, she stood there in a daze. That feeling of weakness that she hadn't felt for so many years once again assaulted her. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her heart, and tears filled her eyes. She muttered, "After today, I'm going to leave. I'm really going to leave. If I can't trample the three holy lands to the ground for you, I might never come back. You, don't be lonely. Wait for me to avenge you, and I'll accompany you." Emocia, Emocia. This was the first time she called out this affectionate nickname. Mei Shuyan's heart turned sour, and her tears fell like rain again. He couldn't hear it anymore. This feeling could be remembered, but she was already lost at that time. Why? Why did she have to wait until she lost him to understand that her heart could not be without him? Ifin? Ha, this beautiful lady? Why are you calling out this young master's name so affectionately? This big brother is very thin-skinned. Hearing you call me like that, half of my body has gone limp. It's really hard to accept a beauty's kindness. Forget it. Forget it. This young master will force himself to let you marry her. Suddenly, a voice abruptly rang out. It had the usual glib and cynical tone, and there was a hint of evil in its tone. Anyone who heard it would know that it was an out-and-out, hedonistic, and playboy type of person. Mei Shuyan's body shook, and she suddenly felt the world spinning around her. Her body swayed unnaturally, and she slowly turned around in disbelief. She was afraid that if she turned around too fast, this voice would suddenly disappear like a phantom. Even if this was a dream, she wanted to wake up from this dream as late as possible. It would be best if she didn't wake up at all. All the trees were silent, waiting for the rain to fall. No matter how slowly she turned around, there would eventually be an end. Mei Shuyan finally turned around and looked over with tears in her eyes. A hateful, smiling face was swaying in front of her eyes, slowly becoming clearer. June Moxie's handsome face was looking at her with a strange expression. Mei Shuyan was stunned, completely stunned. She couldn't help but use the back of her hand to wipe her tears and then rub her eyes. A strong person like her actually showed such a clumsy behavior of not trusting her own eyes. It could be seen that this matter had a huge impact on her heart. Hey. June Moxie's face was full of smiles as he stretched out his hand and waved it in front of Mei Shuyan. He teased, "Wow, who is this beautiful lady who is crying like a kitten? Why don't I recognize her? Ah, so it's Lord Tianfa's Beast King Venerable Mei. Am I dreaming? I really didn't expect Venerable Mei to have such a woman's side. If this is really a dream, then wake up later. What a beautiful and sad dream." Mei Shuyan was startled when she heard this. She looked at June Dashao in a daze, and finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. Her smile had just bloomed when it disappeared. Her mouth flattened, and she let out a cry. Tears flowed down her face, and she suddenly rushed into June Moxie's embrace. She hugged him tightly, as if she wanted to melt her body into his. Her body trembled after a long time. She finally stood up from June Moxie's embrace. She carefully looked at June Moxie's strange face, and finally confirmed that the person in front of her was a living person. Suddenly, the emotions that she had accumulated for the past few days exploded out. Her small fist pounded on his chest like crazy. She didn't care about her image as she cried, "You bastard, you bastard, you bastard! I'll beat you to death! I'll beat you to death! I'll beat you to death! You scared me to death! Boo-hoo!" After pounding on him for a while, she suddenly hugged him with all her might again. It was as if she had suddenly regained an extremely important treasure and couldn't bear to let go of it. June Moxie naturally didn't know that he had already let the cat out of the bag. He was still feeling very strange in his heart. Why is Mei Shuiyin so emotional today? Why is her mood so abnormal? What's going on? Could it be that my cultivation has improved greatly, and even my character has improved greatly? For such a beauty to throw herself into my arms, and even pounce on me, isn't this a little too much? But with a beauty taking the initiative to throw herself into his arms, it would be a waste not to hug her. Even if he hugged her, it would still be a waste to hug her. Such a ready-made advantage that was delivered to his doorstep. It wouldn't be too much even if he had 8 or 10 of them every day. How could he not take advantage of it? But June Moxie immediately dispelled this thought, because he could feel the delicate body of the beauty in his arms trembling uncontrollably. It was obviously a sign of extreme fear. Just what had happened to cause the #1 person of Tian Fa to be in such a panic? June Moxie's mind was spinning rapidly. No matter how he looked at it, he shouldn't be behaving like this. In the room, Guan Qinghan and Qian Sun Serpent Queen immediately rushed out. These few days, the two of them were also extremely anxious. They weren't any less anxious than Mei Shuiyin. Now that they saw June Moxie suddenly appear, the two of them suddenly had an urge to rush into his arms and hug him tightly. But the moment they came out, they saw the two of them hugging so tightly in the courtyard. A strange look flashed in the eyes of the two girls. They stood quietly at a distance, looking at the two people hugging each other. They felt an indescribable feeling in their hearts. There was sadness, gratification, happiness, and disappointment. Guan Qinghan let out a silent sigh. Her eyelids drooped, and she quietly took 2 steps back. After an unknown amount of time, Mei Shuiyin finally calmed her emotions. She immediately knew that something was wrong. She hurriedly left June Moxie's embrace and looked at him longingly. Only then did she return to her previous icy state. She was graceful and magnanimous, but the tear stains on her face and her red eyes looked a little out of place. Mei Shuiyin forced herself to be dignified. Her face was still red and white. She felt extremely embarrassed for her behavior. She forced a straight face and asked with a frown, "What have you been doing these few days? You didn't even greet us. Don't you know that everyone is worried about you? How can you be so irresponsible? How can you not care about the bigger picture? How can you be so selfish? How can you be so in?" The last thing he uttered was heavy and full of majesty. June Moxie scratched his head. His face was full of curiosity. He stretched out his hand to touch Mei Shuiyin's forehead. He asked suspiciously, You don't have a fever, do you?" Mei Shuiyin immediately became angry. She slapped his hand to the side and said sternly, "Speak. Where did you go?" June Moxie's face turned bitter. He had just come for Grandpa June and the third uncle's place. He had already been interrogated twice. He did not expect to be interrogated a third time. Am I going to be a criminal today? What an unlucky year. June Moxie had no choice but to use the same excuse he had told her twice. Little did he know that the person in front of him already knew his background. Mei Shuiyin did not intend to do anything. Where did June Moxie go these few days? Was there need to ask? He must be recuperating. The reason why Mei Shuiyin had asked this question was because she felt embarrassed to find a way out of this embarrassing situation. As for how June Emosia would answer, it was not important to her at all. The important thing was that he was still alive. That was more than enough. If he was not around, the world would be buried with him. Chapter 558. She could clearly feel the chaotic aura of nature on Jun Moxie's body, and she could hear Jun Moxie's voice. Mei Shuyan was 100% sure that this guy in front of her was the mysterious black-robed man. However, Mei Shuyan didn't intend to expose him. She would just take it as a secret that both of them were aware of. Besides, she could also enjoy Jun Moxie's performance every day. It doesn't seem too bad. It doesn't matter whether it's him or not. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. He's fine. That's the most important thing. Jun Moxie saw that Mei Shuyan's emotions had finally recovered, and he felt relieved. He turned around and walked towards Guan Qinghan. Guan Qinghan saw that he was walking towards her, and there was a hint of shyness in her eyes, but there was also a hint of gratification. She slowly lowered her head, bit her lips, and remained silent. "Are you also worried about me?" Guan Qinghan could be considered tall among the women. Among all the women that Jun Moxie knew, only Mei Shuyan was slightly taller than her. The others, such as Raimu, Dugu Xiaoi, Han Yinming, Sun Xiaomei, and Qinsun Serpent Queen were slightly shorter than her. However, Jun Moxie was standing in front of her, and he was more than half a head taller than her. Guan Qinghan forced a smile and was about to raise her head when she suddenly felt a pair of big hands embracing her. Jun Moxie's voice came into her ears, and it was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. "Don't worry, your man's life is very long. A cat only has 9 lives, and I have 81. Guan Qinghan felt her body go soft. She could feel the warmth of his body and the strong, manly scent. Hearing him call himself her man, her heart was beating like a deer, and she couldn't help but blush. But this time, she didn't struggle at all. She just quietly leaned in his arms. Guan Qinghan really didn't want to struggle against her will anymore. These days, Mei Shuyan was on the verge of exploding, and Guan Qinghan was also on the verge of breaking down. Now that she could hear his heartbeat through his clothes, it was truly a great blessing. Suddenly, all the grievances in her heart vanished like smoke in thin air. No matter what, it was all worth it. Come to think of it, Jun Daxiao had been constantly teasing Mei Shuyan in front of her and teasing Guan Qinghan in front of Mei Shuyan. Perhaps it was the so-called habit, but the two women seemed to have accepted each other's existence, although they couldn't help but feel a little jealous in their hearts. The two women knew Jun Moxie's feelings. Besides, in this era of male supremacy, it wasn't a big deal for a man to have 3 or 4 wives. On the contrary, it was rare for a man to have only one wife. Even the most gentlemanly of Taoists wouldn't get entangled in this matter. Jun Mo Xie was almost 18 years old, but he still didn't have a concubine by his side. This was a very rare occurrence. At the very least, he was the only one in the entire Tianxiang city's aristocratic family. There were even some who were younger than Jun Moxie by 2 or 3 years, but already had a large number of wives and concubines. They hugged silently for a while, and both of them felt a kind of heartfelt warmth flowing quietly between them. It was a kind of happiness where silence was better than words. After a long time, Guan Qinghan finally lifted her head from his embrace. Her face was as red as the morning sun, and her eyes were evasive. Her cold demeanor had long disappeared, and at this moment, she seemed like a shy and timid wife. Mei Shuyan's anxiety these past few days had been seen by Guan Qinghan. She clearly knew that Mei Shuyan was anxious and worried about Jun Moxie's disappearance. Although Guan Qinghan didn't know what had happened, but from Mei Shuyan's attitude, Guan Qinghan could see that it was no small matter. Could it be that Jun Moxie had encountered some danger that he couldn't get through? Otherwise, why would Mei Shuyan, who had such a superb mysterious art, be so anxious? Therefore, Guan Qinghan had been very worried for the past few days. Seeing that Mei Shuyan seemed to be getting more and more desperate by the day, Guan Qinghan also seemed to feel that perhaps an extremely important thing was really getting further and further away from her. Now that she saw Jun Moxie alive and well, Guan Qinghan also felt an inexplicable joy, as if she had found something that she had lost. Therefore, even with Guan Qinghan's cold demeanor, she didn't try to hide her feelings at this moment. It was because the momentary joy had covered all the hypocrisy on her face. Of course, Once she regained her rationality, Guanqing Han also returned to her cold demeanor, and she wouldn't be in Jun Daxiao's embrace anymore. Jun Moxie looked at this, then looked at that, and was somewhat puzzled. What's the matter with these two women? Why are they turning hostile like flipping a book? Moreover, one is more excessive than the other. I felt their passion a moment ago. I've secretly rejoiced in my heart that my luck has finally taken a turn for the better. My luck has finally taken a turn for the better. I've been so excited that I've finally had the opportunity to enjoy myself for a long time. But now, their faces have suddenly changed. They've returned to their previous state. Oh my God, this life's great joy and great sorrow changed so quickly. This is killing me. Could it be that I was actually dreaming? Rubbing his face hard, Jun Moxie confirmed that everything in front of him was real. He couldn't help but mutter, "Ah, women are really a kind of incomprehensible animal. One moment it's sunny, the next moment it's rainy. Just a moment ago, they were still showing their true feelings, and now they're turning hostile. It really tests a man's heart. It's hard to be a person, but it's even harder to be a man, and it's even harder to be a common man." Jun Moxie sighed with a bit of hidden bitterness. "Hello, little Qian Sun. Come hug your big brother and comfort your big brother's fragile heart that has been ravaged several times." Jun Moxie simply changed his target since the two beauties were no longer interested in him. He smiled and said, "It would be a pleasant surprise if he could reap some harvest." "Humph!" Snake King glared at him with an ominous glint in his eyes. He had already hidden his little thoughts and pretended to be fierce as he coldly snorted and said, "What do you want to do? Do I know you that well?" Jun Moxie smiled and moved closer. Qian Sun bluntly turned her wrist and shook it. Then, two snakes scuttled over with a whoosh sound. Jun Moxie easily dodged them in a flustered manner. He shouted and continued to smile mischievously. "Crap! How can you be so ruthless? Where did you get these things in the middle of winter? They're good stuff. Do you have more? Give me a few more, and I'll stew them tonight. It doesn't matter if it's more ruthless. I appreciate your kindness." Qian Sun rolled her eyes, turned around, and went back in. Mei Shuyan and Guanqing Han also rolled their eyes at him and went back into the house. In an instant, Jun Daxiao stood alone outside, all alone. Rubbing his nose, Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and shamelessly followed them in. Although this fellow's strength had improved, there was still a long way to go before he reached the peak. But in terms of the thickness of his face, no one could compare to him. Super peak. There's one thing that I don't quite understand. Jun Moxie's face turned serious, and he looked at Mei Xuan. According to the lineup of the three holy lands this time, the strength of any one of them has already surpassed Tian Fa Forest. In fact, just based on the lineup this time, the combined strength of any one of these families would surpass the current strength of Tian Fa. Apart from you, the rest of Tian Fa, including the Snake King and the rest, are definitely not as strong as the people from the three holy lands. He paused for a while and continued. In fact, it's not just a little bit inferior. From what I know, in Tian Fa Forest, only the 10 Beast Kings are strong in their human forms. The rest, even those level 9 Xian beasts, are only average in strength. Your original 1 ferocious and 3 saints. How did you calculate that? Just based on the rankings, it seems like your Tian Fa is slightly stronger. I really can't understand. Mei Shuyan was silent for a while. Then, Ling Ling said, "Your analysis of the strength of the strong is indeed correct. Unfortunately, you neglected something very important. Even if the three holy lands are all immortals, how many of them are there in total? But our Tian Fa Forest Xian beast number in the hundreds of millions. To put it bluntly, a single spit from a beast is enough to drown the three holy lands. How can the combined strength of Tian Fa's ferocious beasts be comparable to that of the three holy lands? I'm not neglecting this point. When the numbers reach a limit, it doesn't matter how strong the enemy is. Perhaps this is the original intention of the three holy lands to deal with Tian Fa, but I still find it very strange. Tian Fa's Xian beasts are talented and can be said to be blessed by the heavens. But compared to the three holy lands, why is there such a huge difference in their strength? June Moxie really could not understand this matter. AI, Tion FA has the reputation of being a dangerous place, and its reputation is even higher than the three holy lands. How can there be a lack of high-level strength? In the past war for seizing the heavens, the number of Xian from Tion Fa was almost equal to the total number of the three holy lands. But in recent years, there have been some changes. Mei Shuiyin seemed to be extremely unwilling to talk about this matter. She bit her lips and said, "Actually, the ones who appear in front of the world today should not be the 10 great Xian Beast Kings. It should be the supreme Xian Beast Kings from the previous generation." But after something happened, the seniors all went into seclusion. The Tion Fa forest cannot go without a Xian Beast King. So, we have no choice but to hold the fort. Mei Shuiyin's words were very vague. She did not say anything specific. But June Moxie already understood. So that's how it is. They are a generation apart. No wonder they look so strange. What happened in the Tion Fa forest? What kind of big event has led to this situation? But since Mei Shuiyin did not want to say it clearly, June Moxie did not ask. Now, his attention had a new target. "Why is your complexion so ugly? Are you injured?" June Moxie naturally would not say that he saw it with his own eyes. But, judging from a battle that day, Mei Shuiyin should not have been injured so badly. "It's just an old injury that has not healed. It's not a big deal," Mei Shuiyin said calmly. "Oh, I see." June Moxie thought that this was reasonable. But he did not notice that Mei Shuiyin had directly told him the most basic reason, saving him the time to ask. "Why didn't you look for me when you were injured?" "Brother, I'm a divine doctor." June Moxie laughed loudly. "This is just a small injury. It's a piece of cake for me. Brother, you will be cured immediately." June Moxie grabbed Mei Shuiyin's hand and activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Then, he probed, suddenly, that you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.